7 o'clock in the morning here in Birmingham, Alabama. I am your host, Kirk McElroy. Cubic.
Whew.
It's one of those days. Cole Cubelic on dad duty. So real work. For us, Say Bear, we're just showing and going and talking some college football.
I don't know. It feels weird being back after being on jury duty for a couple days.
Yeah, we're going to get your story on that a little later. I told my story after jury duty and how enlightening of an experience it was. I actually went back and checked the case that I was assigned to. And yours was settled, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's, I guess, good. Mine was criminal, and the guy was found to be innocent.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, and it was a murder. So it was kind of crazy. But I honestly looking at some of the information that they presented to us in kind of a short period of time. I'm not surprised that they found that verdict. I also found him guilty. Wouldn't have been surprised with that. It was a self-defense angle and stuff. So interesting stuff. John Saber returning after a 2-day hiatus at jury duty. I had one last spring. When was it? Last spring? Fall?
Yeah. It wasn't fall. It was
spring.
Maybe summer. Yeah.
I think it was
not quite a year ago.
I think it was spring. I think it was right before May was born. So I feel like it was January, February. But anyways, it was really, it's actually a good experience. So doing your civic duty, good experience to go through that. We will get John Saber's update on that. We'll have Mac Lain. We haven't really talked ACC. I'm not saying we need to go all in, but this is actually turning into quite an intriguing league. And they just landed a new extension with ESPN. We'll talk a little bit about that. How close does the new ESPN deal get the ACC to the SEC's teams as far as annual revenue distribution? And the ACC in some cases is pushing all their chips into the middle of the table. All of them. Bill Belichick has a lot of money at his disposal via the NIL. So is North Carolina going to finally become the sleeping giant that we have always thought it might become? Other things, we will go a little bit deeper into the hiring of Ryan Grubb. I don't feel like we've adequately been able to get, I guess, a pulse of the fans on Ryan Grubb. I don't feel like we haven't really had enough time. I mean, the last 2 days have been so busy with some of the news and notes and information. We haven't really gotten your take on Ryan Grubb. Are you excited? Are you looking forward to it? Does this make a difference to you? Do you feel like this is the missing piece? Is he the guy that's going to provide stability and consistency to the offense? I don't know the answers to that necessarily, but I'd be curious to get your take. How do you feel about it? We are going to spend a little bit of time on the bubble because we're starting to we're a month and a half away from Selection Day, and there's some teams in the SEC that are on the bubble. One in particular is an SEC blue blood. I guess I think they're an SEC blue blood, but maybe you guys might not feel that way. They've won a national championship of basketball before. So that to me qualifies you in many ways as a blue blood. We're going to have Dr. Lyle Kane of Andrews Sports Medicine join us here at the top of the 8 o'clock hour. He's going to help us understand what led Scott Cochran, former strength coach of Alabama, to becoming the head coach of West Alabama. What he's been doing in the meantime. Dr. Kane and Scott Cochran have a very close relationship. I, of course, am really tight with Coach Cochran as well. So it'll be a good discussion there. And then we'll have Sam McKewon on at 9 o'clock, talk a little Nebraska. And not really going to be breaking down Nebraska's roster, not really going to be going through win totals for Nebraska or going 1 through 22. But Matt Rule, not that dissimilar to North Carolina, is trying to revitalize a once remarkably proud program. And there have been a lot of speed bumps along the way. And we have found, at least I have found on this show over the last 3 years, there is a universal interest in Nebraska. I'm not saying you like them. I'm not saying you hate them. I'm not saying that you're a fan. I'm not saying they're your rival. But there is a universal interest in Nebraska because I think a lot of people, self-included, look at Nebraska a little bit like the pre-Nick Saban Alabama. And some of you might take that as a slight. I don't intend it to be that. This was a program that when I was a child, I don't think there were seasons There was never a game I went into watching a Nebraska game that I thought they were going to lose. I mean, they were a dominant force for the better part of the first 12 or 13 years of my life. I mean, completely dominant force. And while the landscape has shifted and things have adjusted, and since they've gone to the Big Ten, it's been met with very underwhelming performance. Their best coach since leaving the Big 12 was Bo Pelini, and he got run out of town after going 9-4 every year. So, but they do still have a lot of access to resources, and with regionality going by the wayside in recruiting, I am a firm believer that Nebraska can get back and might, maybe sooner than later. So we'll talk with Sam McKewon about that. They also made some news earlier this week. They're going to be canceling their spring game because they're tired of tampering. We will have a discussion on that a little bit later on the show. And win totals are out. Win totals are out. We'll take a peek. I'm not saying we go all in. I'm not saying we spend 2 hours on it. But we will take a peek at some win totals because the Alabama win total is an eye-opener. Just going to tell you, the Alabama win total is a real eye-opener. I think it's really low, but what do I know? I'm just a Bama homer. All right, when we come back, we're going to take a short break here, early break here, visit with Mac Lain of the ACC Network and ESPN. He's going to join us next. He's on dad duty, and his daughter wakes up at around 7:30. So we got to make sure that we get him out in time for that because we would never want to get in the way of him doing his dadly duties. But should be good. Looking forward to it. Mac Lain on the other side next on McElroy and Cubelic. Good morning, Jock 94.5. Welcome back, Birmingham, Alabama. We'll get right to it because we don't want to waste any of his time. He's on dad duty, and we know that that's a dangerous game. He's Eric Mac Lain of the ACC Network and of ESPN. He joins us now here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Eric, we appreciate the time, my friend. A little dad duty this morning, bud?
Great to see you. A little dad duty this morning, and as per form, as you would know, because I have something to do in the morning, she got up early, and we're letting Miss Rachel watch her a little bit today while I talk to you.
That's perfect. Soon it will be Miss Mika, and then it'll be Mr. Blippy, and it'll be all sorts of other activities. They're great babysitters on YouTube.
No question.
Or on Disney Plus, or on any of the aforementioned streaming services. We wanted to have you on. I don't feel like we've done any discussion really on the ACC upcoming. We've talked a little Clemson. But man, there's been very little discussion on our show about what could be coming. Let's start, though, with the business aspect of it and the extension that ESPN acted on to own exclusive rights of the ACC through 2036. What does this mean for the league, and how is this a good thing for the league?
Yeah, great question, and I love the starting point because it is, just such a relevant thing, and it's job security, right? For a lot of people and for the conference, and I know it's a big, kind of sigh of relief, but also for ESPN. I mean, to get that type of content, to get that type of, games and things that they can put on their networks and things of that nature, it really was a no-brainer. So, the speculation and some people saying that ESPN wasn't going to do that, I just never quite understood it because it's a bargain, right? I mean, when you look, financially at the commitment compared to other leagues, why wouldn't you want to extend that and things of that nature? And then, of course, for the league itself, to continue to have that through 36. And really the most interesting thing to come about it, Greg, is just hearing and seeing, what this new unequal revenue distribution model is going to look like that potentially will keep Clemson, will keep Florida State, and keep them happy is probably the biggest thing. I know everybody, wants to join the SEC and wants to join the Big Ten, but you got to have an offer first. You can't just jump to jump. So I think the biggest thing is those parties coming together, finding a healthy way, which makes sense, right? I mean, I'm sure other leagues get kind of frustrated with the bulk of the talent that is at the top. Essentially carrying these leagues and everybody getting the equal pot. So, in one where there's a little bit more, kind of gap than others, you really want to be able to have your big dogs eat.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And it's really a meritocracy, which I'm all for. Like, I totally support all aspects of meritocracy. If you go out and perform, you should be paid more. Welcome to life.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think anyone's crying if Mahomes is, making more than Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, he's more important. So looking at how this could have a positive impact on the Clemson Tigers, the Florida State Seminoles, the Miami Hurricanes, and the North Carolina Tar Heels, will this now I know Clemson's been there. Right. They don't need a ton of help. They've been there. They've ascended to the mountaintop, maybe not in this NIL era, but they've been there in recent enough years to where they're probably in pretty good shape. And they'll be in great shape this year. But can this push a North Carolina up to the point where they can be a consistent contender, or Miami, who's kind of felt a little underwhelming up until last year for the better part of the last 2 decades?
Yeah, you'd like to think so, right? Especially when you can have that flux of money, and now the biggest thing is how do you use it, right? Because we it's legal to pay these guys and to pay your athletes, and I think kind of the biggest hiccup that we're going back and forth on every day. I mean, I'm texting with people, and it's it is the back and forth is this Title IX thing that's going to creep in with the potential of splitting your revenue. So we have that magical number of $20.5 million that you can spread, and you can spread directly to the athletes from, your athletic department budget. And now the hang up is, where does that money go? Does it have to go somewhere else? And maybe was that more of a, Democratic thing? And now that the Republicans are in office, and how much does politics, it's crazy when politics gets so involved into our sports and into our collegiate ranks here, but that truly, is a big deal and a big push of it. But the extra money for facilities and for, other things that they can push there is certainly going to help. And, you mentioned North Carolina, the commitment that they've shown, my goodness, going out and getting, the greatest NFL coach ever is arguably, a massive push. And for them to say, yeah, we want to win, we want to be better. It's not acceptable, to go through two generational type quarterbacks with Sam Howell. Then, obviously Drake May at the Patriots just made his first Pro Bowl as a rookie, to just have 8 wins or less, with those guys. That's unacceptable. And we have to be better. So seeing that, going out and doing that is obviously a big step. But as you and I both know, Greg, you got to win on the field, and you have to make those things count.
You absolutely do. So as we visit with Eric Mac Lain of the ACC Network, North Carolina doesn't really have the personnel this year, in my opinion, to be relevant. They're going to be because of who their coach is, but I think it's going to be a little bit like Colorado 2 years ago, where there's a lot of hype and maybe not a lot of substance. Am I wrong in reading that roster right now?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it's an interesting boat for me, right? You got to teeter, both lines of exactly how you just introduced me versus, being real and talking about college football from a whole. I love the staff. Trust me, I do. And again, having a guy of that magnitude, the other experienced coaches that he has in there. I mean, he has the head strength coach of the Patriots as well that came down with him, and other guys that have been all throughout the NFL. And that's important, and that matters. And certainly situationally in games and winning situations, you hope that they can put them in the best situation possible. But as you just said, at the end of the day, if you don't have the guys to do it, it does not matter. It doesn't matter how great your coaching is if you can't line up against Clemson, against Miami, against Virginia Tech, Florida State, and match the physicality, match the personnel to be able to go toe-to-toe. And certainly I think, like you said, they will be able to in the future, especially with this model of being able to pay guys. And obviously these guys have way more experience than most doing that. So will be fascinating to see how quickly does it happen. Time will tell.
It certainly will be fascinating. Clemson, I think, Eric, I'm not saying it because it's you. I'm saying it because I really believe it. I don't think there's a team that I have fewer questions about heading into this upcoming season. I think they've adequately addressed some needs. They were a little thin on the edges of the defensive line. I think running back, to be honest, I love Maffa, but the version of Maffa that we saw down the stretch, he was banged up. He wasn't the same guy. I think they'll miss Brenningstool for sure at tight end. But for the most part, this roster, a playoff roster, an ACC championship roster, returns mostly intact. And I think they got an upgrade on the defensive side with their defensive coordinator hire of Tom Allen. So why shouldn't this team be in the mix as a potential national championship contender and probably a preseason top 5 team?
Yeah, I think they will be, Greg, for all those reasons you just mentioned. But probably the biggest is Kate Klubnik's back and the growth that we saw from him. And obviously, you got to call a number of those games and see him up close and personal. I don't know if there's a QB in the country that made a bigger jump, in year 1 to year 2 as a starter than he did. And we expect that, right? That's what you hope to see. That's what you expect to see from a guy, because quarterback's the hardest position in all of sports. You have control over everything. And as the game is getting, bigger, faster, stronger, it's more, difficult on that guy. And we just have this thought process as a society. Oh, this guy's a 5-star. He's number, whatever, 1 in his class. He's going to come in right away. No, man, he still has to grow. He still has to learn. He still has to develop. Oh, by the way, he needs guys to make plays around him too, which Clemson did a great job at this year. So to continue to see his growth, I think there is, another step that he can take, which is terrifying because he was really, really good. I mean, he was amongst the best in the country statistically in a lot of different things. So seeing him back with all his wide receivers, I think you're right about the tight end and running back room where it's going to be a little bit more by committee. There's not just going to be that guy like they had with Brenningstool, like they had with Maffa, but I feel really confident about the guys behind them, especially in bulk or in unison, where you have maybe 2 or 3 guys that are making up, the same production that one guy did last year. So you're getting fresher reps, you're staying healthier, hopefully. The offensive line is going to be great, only missing one guy, and they feel really good about the young man coming up behind him at the left guard position. And then defensive end was a huge point of emphasis, to the point to where you're taking Peter Woods, arguably one of the best defensive tackles in the country, and you're having to put him at defensive end. Like that's not fun. Nobody wants to take one of their best players at what they do and move him somewhere else. They addressed that in the transfer portal. Coach Sweeney jumping in head first now, and going and getting some needs that he really, felt his team needed. And, excited to see that. And you mentioned Coach Allen. I could speak about fit for an hour, but, schematically who he is, how aggressive. I like how he uses kind of a, hybrid defensive end linebacker type guy. Is that, a young transfer from Alabama? Is that going to be the transfer from Purdue? Who is going to be kind of that stand up, move around, really be aggressive type of guy? And the reviews I've already heard from energy, excitement, passion is through the roof, which, I know is something that is drastically important from the defensive coordinator spot.
Yeah, I don't know how well you know him. You're going to love him. He's just the man. One of the best people in the business, and just a first-class human being and a great coach. So very much look forward to seeing what he does there at Clemson. When you look at the Miami roster, it's hard to get a great sense. I mean, they are so transfer portal dependent last year that it's kind of hard. They've recruited well, though. I mean, it's like it's easy to get enamored with what was lost. And then I think you could potentially lose sight of what they've been developing behind what was lost. So I'm probably a little down on them compared to where I was going into last year, but I'm okay to be swayed in a different direction. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing because it's almost like we have to be patient. We have to see, where is Carson Beck going to be health-wise, because I think obviously he's a great player. And, I think what folks maybe didn't want to give enough credit or do, I don't know, is that he had a lot of drops last year, man. And just, really key situations, the ball going through guys' hands. And, I think that's why his numbers were down, still good, but down, from that crazy year he had 2 years ago, completing like 73%, 4,000 plus yards, whatever it was. And so you time will tell on that. And if he's healthy, in summertime, because he's clearly going to miss all of the spring, which is important, right? You can't get chemistry with wide receivers without throwing to wide receivers. I know we can be friends and we can watch film, but, to really feel it, you've got to have those reps, and you know that better than anybody. So missing that will be interesting. How much can he go in summer, or is he limited all the way up to, camp is going to be my biggest, kind of flag that I'm looking at and seeing how they kind of get that going and where they are. You talk about that talent everywhere else. It does seem like now the reason, or the initial reason, that everyone was so excited was Mario Cristobal can recruit. Coach Cristobal recruits better than anybody almost. When you see how he puts in the work, what he's able to do in the classes that he's been able to acquire and put in this thing, now it's their turn. Those sophomores that are juniors, those freshmen that are sophomores, it's time to go. And it's going to be exciting to see, the top ACC class that they've had, 2 or 3 years in the past now. How can they translate? How can they step up and be the leaders that, maybe they've had to supplement via NIL transfer portal that is available now, really for everybody. But if Carson's healthy, I think the Canes are squarely back looking at trying to make a playoff, trying to make an ACC championship, and, as talented as it gets roster-wise.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope they are. I think I would love for Carson to bounce back. I hate the way things ended last year on a Hail Mary where he hurt his arm. Like, it just would be nice to see some redemption there. That'd be terrific. Finally, Eric, as we get you out of here, you've been generous with your time. We appreciate you. Is there a team that we're just not talking enough about? Like last year, my trendy dog was Georgia Tech. That's kind of, I liked Syracuse, not as much as they ended up, not as good as they ended up becoming. I thought they had a chance to be an 8-win team or so. They overachieved. I'm kind of having a hard time this year finding that trendy dog that's going to make some noise. Is there one?
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech, similar to what you did last year, is a good pick. I mean, Haynes King is a warrior. I mean, that guy is really, really good. Going to be a guy that, leaves a lasting legacy at Georgia Tech. And I think we saw his grit, his determination, his willpower in that Georgia game, which was so fun, going back and forth. And, they've got a young cat in Aaron Philo right behind them that is just a beast and ready to be unleashed. And so, for whatever reason, Haynes is not able to go, Philo will step in and immediately be just fine and be able to push the ball downfield. Losing Santucci on the defensive side is going to be interesting. I don't think Coach Key I don't think he's really missed on some of the hires that he's made or had to make. And so I hope that continues, obviously, with the defensive side and, just the grit, the competitiveness, the toughness. That's just who Georgia Tech is, right? You play them, you're going to be sore the next day. They're physical as it gets. But of course, any team that plays Georgia and Clemson, it's a tough road. It's a tough road ahead. And obviously they have that. SMU, I don't think we put them in the sleeper conversation, but just wanted to bring them up. I think Kevin Jennings has the opportunity to really take a Cade Klubnik type jump, year 1 to year 2. He's not going into the offseason fighting for the starting spot. He's not going into camp as number 2 or 1B. He's the guy. And the whole team knows that. The whole team's rallying. The whole team is excited and knows they can win any game with him. I think a lot of people probably have a bad taste in their mouth because of, that last playoff game where he, lost them the game. He had 3 picks, 2 pick sixes. It's hard to overcome. But he's going to grow from that. He's going to get much better. And I think SMU, although they lose a lot of talent, man, they bring a lot in and have a great recruiting class, the best ever coming in on top of the guys that have been there in the transfer portal additions.
Yeah, at SMU, I really, really like Kevin Jennings. I think some of his mechanics are very flawed, or at least they were last year. Doesn't mean they can't, you can't coach it out of them. But the amount of pressure he puts on his offensive line by retreating the pocket, dude, scares me to death. He's got bad ball security, drops it with one arm, he rolls right heavily. Like, there's a lot of things that he is tough to defend. There's a lot of things about him that make me a nervous wreck as a defensive coordinator. There's also a lot of things that make me a nervous wreck as an offensive coordinator with calling plays and the quarterback. So,
but hey, they know that too, right? And
they do.
That, Coach Lashley and Coach King, Derek King, there can kind of savor that and make it better.
Yeah, I love it. Eric, this has been a great visit, man. We really appreciate your time. Get back to your daughter and best of luck. We'll say a prayer for you here in the break that you can make sure that everything's on the up and up around the house when your wife gets back.
That's right. No, she's the best, man. I appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you, man.
Awesome, dude. Great job. We'll talk soon. Eric Mac Lain of the ACC Network of ESPN. He'll be on some UFL coverage here coming up in a couple weeks as well. So a lot of Mac Lain that you'll get to take in. You can also check out his podcast. He does a nice podcast with Kelly Gramlich. Does a great job. Eric Mac Lain and Kelly Gramlich. You go Gramlich and McLean. You can check it out. They cover a lot of ACC sports, and he's in the weeds in that league. So I always say, like, he's like the ACC Cubelic. Like, that dude is in the freaking foxhole in the ACC. So I always appreciate that. What Cole knows about the SEC, that's what Eric knows about the ACC. So it's always appreciated to get his perspective, and it's always very valuable. We referenced a moment ago about the new deal, the extension that was acted upon by ESPN, and what that means for not just the ACC, but what that could mean for the future of television contracts. It might have an impact on your school. You just don't know it yet. I'll explain next on McElroy and Cubelic, the Morning Jocks 94.5. So the ACC will officially be under ESPN's control through 2036. Now, we have not spent a lot of time on this. But this matters for your school. You just don't know it yet. Now, it doesn't really matter what school you are, by the way. You can be a fan of Mississippi State. You can be a fan of Michigan. We have fans of Michigan State. We have people that listen to the show that support Wyoming, I'm sure. Colorado, USC. We have fans all over the place. Like, we look at the Twitter feeds and the people that tweet into the show and listen to the show. And with where things have gone from a streaming standpoint, you can listen to the show from anywhere. JocksFM.com. You can download the app. It's free. You can listen anywhere. Doesn't matter. And we've noticed the footprint from people listening to our show expand and expand and expand. I mean, we are the home for college sports. Like, we're going to talk college sports, college football primarily, for a vast majority of 3 hours every day. Will we get into some hoops? Sure. I mean, how much can we break down Auburn's 98-70 win over in the second half performance yesterday? We will get to it. It's just not right now. I do want to explain why this ACC extension matters. So if you have not heard, ESPN decided to exercise their opt-in clause with the ACC, meaning that ESPN will own exclusivity over all ACC content between now and 2036. It's not a surprise. There was a February 1st deadline that could end the partnership in 2027, but it's a very ESPN-friendly contract. So ESPN was always going to exercise that contract. And that's the reason why Florida State and Clemson the last couple of years have been publicly and privately trying to challenge the grant of rights, which are the rights of the Clemson Tigers and the Florida State Seminoles. The rights are owned by the ACC. That's basically their television rights, their media rights. They have a grant of rights agreement with the ACC, and the ACC has been kind of under attack from its own member institutions. Now, the deal was originally signed in 2016. So you think about how long ago that was. That was nearly 10 years ago, just a couple years into the college football playoff. The ACC was in pretty good shape at that point. Clemson's about to win a national championship. Florida State had won one just a few years prior. Now, there weren't really a lot of other ACC schools that were in the mix, but at the time, it made sense. They wanted the ACC network to be launched. The SEC network launched with success in 2014. So as a result, in order to get the ACC network launched, the ACC really didn't have a great position of leverage. What have we said about leverage, Damian? Oh, he's not listening. But leverage is king. No. Yeah, leverage is king, correct? I mean, leverage is massive. So they didn't have a lot of leverage. So ESPN basically said, all right, yeah, well, that's fine. We'll give you your own network. Guess what? You're going to sign a 10-year deal, and we're going to have an opt-in clause after 10 to extend another 10. They said, sounds good. We just had to get on the air. We need that footprint revenue. So fast forward 10 years, that deal is really, really painfully low for the ACC schools. When you look at the SEC and the Big Ten, schools are generating around 70, 80, $90 million a year, whatever it may be, just from television rights. It's not including what they make in tickets, what they make at the gate of the football games, not what they make in concessions or parking, just on television rights, 70, 80, 90 million. I don't know the exact number. I don't want to look it up right now. It's not important. But what transpired in this extension is now a new frontier with how television revenue could be sourced. Now, we've already started to get away in some cases throughout the last couple of years with realignment. We've already started to get away from the everybody gets paid the same. Like in the SEC, which it works for the SEC, everybody gets paid the same. So that means that Texas's share is the exact same as South Carolina's, which is the exact same as Kentucky's, which is the exact same as Ole Miss's. Everybody gets paid the same in the SEC, and that works for the SEC. That's the way it's always been. Might not be the way it's always going to be, but that's the way it is right now, or at least to the extent of this contract. In the Big Ten, with realignment, they welcomed in SC and UCLA as full members, but in an act of desperation, Oregon and Washington came in basically on sale. So it's already been proven that in the Big Ten, hey, yeah, we'll add Oregon and Washington. That's fine. We'll get 4 teams out west. Works for us, but we're not paying you what everybody else is going to make. They say, okay, that's fine. Whatever. We just need to be in. We need to be invited to the party. I don't care if our ticket costs more. We need to be invited to the party. So this kind of started there. And then SMU and Cal and Stanford, also in a desperate plea to align themselves with the ACC, they took far less. SMU actually waived all television revenues. They make $0 from television. Now they make money from playoff appearances. They have other sources of income, but they don't take $1 of the ACC media distribution. But what transpired here at this most recent extension, this opt-in clause, they are going to begin to reward teams that basically bring more eyeballs, that create more wealth. This is a new format for adjusting television revenue distribution. And what does that mean? It means that's kind of stalled the lawsuits from Florida State and Clemson. They have basically said, we're done. We're not going to sue anymore. We're here until at least 2031, but we want to be paid our fair share. So that's a pretty significant change and alteration with what's already gone down, because now they are implementing a, quote, success-driven initiative as opposed to equal distribution. The brand fund that they are now citing, brand fund, it is going to allocate a portion of television revenue to the schools that are generating the most value. Now, what is the most value? Playoff appearances, things like that. We just talked a couple months ago or a month ago about Notre Dame. Notre Dame got a check for $20 million to make it all the way to the national championship. $20 million. They don't share it with anybody. Why? Because they're not in a conference. If they were in the Big Ten, guess what? That $20 million would be split 17 different ways, along with their one share. In the SEC, if Texas had beaten Ohio State, that $20 million would have been split between Texas and the other 15 SEC schools. Notre Dame got to keep it all. Well, they're doing the same thing in the ACC. But it sounds like they're even going to tweak the deck a little bit to where, yeah, hey, Boston College, we love you. We appreciate you. We really need that Massachusetts market because we can now make a little bit more money on the ACC network because we can charge per household in the ACC network because of your presence in the league. Hey, Syracuse, we really need you because we like having New York. We like having that footprint in the league. But yeah, you're not really the reason why people are watching the ACC. They're not really the reason why people are turning on the ACC network, and teams that are going to be rewarded. Now, I told you this might not have anything to do with you right now. But when the SEC comes up in 10 years, 8 years, 9 years, I believe it's like 2034, 2035, in that vicinity, around there, mid 2030s. Why would this model not potentially be adopted at the SEC level? Is it fair that some schools carry more weight? Is it fair that some schools are of more importance to the bottom line of the SEC? Should Mahomes and Trey Smith make the same amount? Both super important, both valuable, can't win without either of them. But if you had to tell me I got to pick one and they cost the same, Patrick Mahomes or Trey Smith, the right guard, which one are you taking? Damian, I know who you're taking. You're still taking Tyreek Hill over all of them. All right. I know you're taking Xavier Worthy over all of them.
No, I'd probably lean Travis Kelce.
But I think we're getting away from this egalitarian mindset, not just in college football, like in society. Like, all right, you get what you earn. Like it's a meritocracy. If you go and you win a natty, guess what? That's yours. No disrespect to Missouri, But had Georgia gone and won the national championship, what did Missouri do to help Georgia claim that title? Outside of just exist with a patch on their chest. Potentially play them. I mean, yeah, they get money for that. But should it be weighted equally? I personally don't think it's going to be. I think there's too much leverage that these big programs have that they're going to be able to go to the table and say, you know what, guys, if I look at the numbers and the viewership that Georgia's games got last year, that was about 6.5 million viewers a game. Best in college football. Should Vandy make the same as us? Probably not. If we're being honest. So that's a great thing if you're a fan of a team that moves the needle. What happened in the ACC is precedent. And now here's the best part. We have a 10-year sample size with the ACC using this brand fund, this success-driven initiative to pay their best performers. We're going to have 10 years to see if it works. Before we, in a conference that we support the most, before we have to do anything about it. It might be a disaster, in which case the SEC will say, thanks, but no thanks. It might be phenomenal, and we could see Miami, North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State. We could see them competing and pulling away from the ACC, competing at the top of the sport. And then you know what else this helps? This helps Notre Dame. You know why this helps Notre Dame? Because Notre Dame is going to draft. I know they have their exclusive deal with NBC, right? Which pays them comparable to that of what an ACC school gets from ABC, ESPN, and what the Big 12 gets from ABC, ESPN, and Fox. Like Notre Dame's deal, granted 7 or 8 games, is comparable to what the ACC and the Big 12 get for their 12-game regular season packages. So it's not that unusual. They're solid, but they also can draft off more marquee matchups. They can draft off playing quality competition in the ACC. If the ACC improves and the top of the ACC improves, that helps Notre Dame. It helps them with strength of schedule. It helps them with eyeballs. When they go on the road, it will be marquee windows. It's not going to be, Notre Dame at Syracuse noon on E2. It's going to be Notre Dame at Clemson, ABC Prime, 7:30 start. That's good for Notre Dame. So this is going to be a fascinating thing for us to watch, guys. Like you can say, oh, I'm an SEC guy. This doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. More than you realize. And it's going to be very important to watch what happens with the top dogs in the ACC over the next 10 years, because your team might be a top dog in 10 years for the SEC. And then the scary thing is Big Ten might do the same thing. Ohio State, Michigan, they're going to pull away. All right. Penn State, maybe they go and they're kind of the number 3. Maybe Oregon's included in that quartet. I don't know what their pecking order might be. But if they are rewarding performance based on what you do, and you are getting quite literally paid for achievement, which who can fault anyone for that? When I watch a golf tournament, like they don't give the guy that finished 9th the same amount of money they give the guy that finished 1st. What world is that? Like, what world are we living in which we are trying to spread things equally when things are not equal? It's going to change. And the good news is we got a lot of time to figure it out before we get there. I'd like to get your thoughts on it. And text into the show, call into the show. We're going to do top 3 here in just a moment. At the top of the hour, we have Lyle Kane, but we can revisit this conversation at 8:15. So we'll shoulder this. We'll reset it here at 8:15, and we'll get to some of your phone calls. But before we do all of that, it's the top 3. It's brought to you by John Saber today, fresh off jury duty. John, where are we going today?
There are 2 interesting birthdays that are today. You could argue that some are 2 of the greatest of all time. So the top 3 has to do with rivalries.
2 of the top 3s. Wait, if Kendrick Lamar and Drake share a birthday. We got problems.
We don't have problems. Only one of us.
Right.
One of them would have problems.
That's a fair point. One's got a Grammy because of said problems.
Correct. Yes.
Life is good.
It is.
Life is real good. All right, when we come back, top three. John Saber's rivalry edition of top three. Next, McElroy and Cubelic, good morning, Jackson 4-5. Welcome back. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Jack 94.5. Thanks to all our friends in Huntsville listening on 730 and 139 The Ump. Appreciate those of you that have participated on the text line and the tweet line. Are we calling it a tweet line? What do we call it? Tweet line?
Twitter feed or
Whatever
Elon Musk has called it now.
X feed.
I was one with Twix. Twitter, X, combine them both.
Wow. I think there's a trademark on that. But I like it. Damien, any action? Anybody excited?
Yeah, when they were going back to the discussion about Nebraska, Jamie Bailey tweets in, he says, diehard Bama fan, as you know, but Nebraska is my second favorite team. The late 90s Cornhuskers were fun to watch. I want Nebraska to be great again. See, that's where
I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, and I remember, we used to have the blue blood discussion, and with me being the youngest, I would always say that I don't know if, I don't look at Nebraska as like a blue blood, because for the period of my life, they didn't win anything. But they go back to, the old days and stuff, which I get, but it's just, especially like when you talk about the modern, quote unquote, modern day blue bloods, I never really put Nebraska in that category just because they didn't win at a high rate. But I always saw that, the games were always packed, but then when they went through the little lulls, it was bad.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. Believe me. I mean, I get it. And the lulls are bad, but golly, when they were good, whew, you're just a little before your time. Bear, where are we going for the top 3, my friend?
Well, today is the birthday of 2 soccer superstars.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Neymar, he turns 33 today.
Yes.
And Cristiano Ronaldo, he turns 40.
They're the same birthday?
Yeah.
He's 40?
He's 40, yes,
Oh,
correct.
wow.
Now,
Still cashing checks.
it's a little bit
Yeah.
it's a little bit odd because I don't view necessarily them as rivals, but you could argue that each of them is the greatest in their sport. But a lot of times when we have 2 of the greatest, they kind of develop a rivalry. But I wanted to know, what were your top 3 rivalries, period? Not necessarily just in sports,
Ooh.
just straight up, period. So I'll give you mine, give you time to think of yours. Number 3 for me is Brady versus the Manning family. Not
Love
just Manning.
Love that.
I just want Mannings, because Brady obviously was always getting the better of older brother.
Mhm.
And the little brother was like, don't worry, big bro, I got this. Not once, but twice.
Yeah.
But Brady versus the Mannings was always a rivalry I thought was fun. And yes, Brady always got the better of Peyton, even though Peyton got the last laugh. Number 2, Coke versus Pepsi.
Is
You had
it a
to
rivalry?
pick a side.
You had to pick a side.
Is it a
one or the
rivalry,
other.
though?
Not
How
really.
many people
It's kind
chose
of
Pepsi?
one-sided.
I'm not trying to like hate on Pepsi. Like I'll drink Pepsi if that's what's all that's available. But like, how many
Correct,
people
right.
pick Pepsi?
It's. Oh, I mean, they're saying that they're the soda of the South, which, whew, okay, good luck.
The soda of the South.
Coke is in Atlanta. Like we are Coke folks.
I know that, but tell that to Pepsi.
We are Coke.
Number 1, WCW versus WWF.
For a moment, it was
For
really,
83
really
weeks
strong.
ish. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
83 weeks.
Yes.
Yes. And some people are still profiting off of those 83
Perhaps,
weeks.
yes, maybe, yeah.
What's the guy's name that ran WCW?
Eric Bischoff.
Yeah.
Bischoff. Yeah, Bischoff has, I think his podcast called like
Correct,
83
yes.
weeks. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, good stuff. Very good rivalry discussion there. I think Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady. I mean, it's why the NFL is what it is now. I refuse to acknowledge that it was anything before that. Like that is Americana at its very best. I'll go Alabama, Auburn.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can't pick that. If living in this state, like it's as good as it gets. Apply it in any possible way. It's just the best. I just love that rivalry. And the thing is, like, I like Auburn. I really do. Like, I've always liked Auburn. My granddad went to Auburn. Like, I don't have any problems with Auburn, but
So I'm gonna ask you this
golly,
question.
I love that rivalry.
I'm gonna ask you this question. I asked
Yes.
this on Morning Jocks. If in basketball right now, if Auburn were playing for a national title, say Alabama's already got knocked out of the NCAA tournament, would you root for Auburn to win it?
I would, not so much for like Auburn itself, but for my friends that are Auburn fans and for Bruce Pearl, who I really, really admire and appreciate as a human being. So yeah, I wouldn't have a problem doing that. Other rivalries of significance, I'm going to go, gosh, I think Big Ten SEC is a good one right now. Like
Ooh,
there's
yeah,
no
okay.
love
Yeah,
lost
yeah.
in that rivalry. I love that rivalry in sports. And then Coke versus Pepsi is awesome. I love that. Golly. Right now, we could just go U.S. versus the world. You know, U.S.
Yeah.
versus the world's a rivalry right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Number 3 for me, John Jones and Daniel Cormier from UFC. Number 2, Auburn, Alabama, and number 1, the Tennessee Titans and quarterback position since Steve McNair.
wow.
It's not really a rivalry when it's one-sided.
Tannehill.
Yeah, he was good
Mhm.
when he was handing it off to Derrick Henry. The best one they have
I
now.
literally got nobody else.
The best one they had these plays for Washington.
Ah, Welcome back, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Jack 94.5. Hour number 2. Lots to look forward to here in the next couple hours of the show. Dr. Lyle Kane coming up in a moment. Sam McKewon coming up in 1 hour. Talk a little Nebraska. How do they get back to the top of the college football world? A moment ago, biggest rivalries in pretty much anything. He didn't say specifically.
Yeah, just rivalries in general.
Yeah, any rivalry. And there's some good action on the Twitter feed. Damian, where are we going?
It is indeed. Jamie Bailey tweets in again. He has his top 3 rivalries. 1, he's got Bama versus the Barn. 2, he's got Bird versus Magic. And 3, Army versus Navy.
It doesn't get much better than Bird versus Magic in the NBA. Yeah. Right? I mean, I don't know if there was another one that would be even close. I mean, because there was never, it felt like a time when there might have been rival, like, okay, maybe like Kobe and Iverson for 3 years, but it never felt like Iverson ever had a real chance to be able to close like that. Maybe there's some I'm missing. All right, the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls there for a little while before Michael get over the hump. I mean, maybe there were some, but it never felt quite as intense as Bird Magic. Obviously before my time, but.
Right. Stephen Madrid, he texted in, he's got Pizza Hut versus Domino's. Russia versus the USA, and Tupac versus Biggie.
Good ones. Very solid. Nothing wrong with any of those. I don't know if I would go as far as to say Pizza Hut versus Domino's. Papa John's to me is the best of the traditional
the old triple threat match.
Deliveries.
Okay.
The old triple threat.
The old triple threat.
All we need is like a barbed wire bat and we're cooking. We're in good shape. We just need Sting to run out and we'll have a barbed wire bat and we're in great shape. We do have some breaking news in the McElroy family. Fresh off the press and highly appropriate considering who our next guest is. But Vince McElroy, my 6-year-old, just turned 6 a couple days ago. He has lost his first tooth.
Hey,
yeah, lost the first tooth.
Hey,
bottom tooth.
Ooh, okay.
I had not heard that. I didn't know bottom teeth fell out before the top. Maybe mine did. I don't remember. But this is breaking news, and I feel like it's important to get medical advice from a medical doctor. He is not a PhD. He is an MD. His name is Dr. Lyle Kane. And we brought him on to talk about Scott Cochran and a few other things coming up for the Super Bowl. But I must first ask you, this is not an emergency, right, Dr. Kane? Like a tooth being lost for the first time. Like we don't need to rush to the ER, right?
That's awesome. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I mean, they tell you put it in milk, right? Put it in milk, and maybe you can put it back in and make it go back together. That's for adults. No, for kids, no emergency. It's as expected. I was thinking as you said that I vividly remember losing my first tooth over in Crestline. We had a dentist lived up the street from me, and it started getting loose and kind of hanging by that thread. And my mom and dad had me walk up the street to my dentist's house, and he pulled it right there in the front yard. With his fingers, just reached in my mouth and pulled my tooth out. And it was pretty traumatic back then. So when the first time it happens, you remember it pretty well.
Yeah, I would say so. Having your teeth removed by hand from some strange man up the street is not something I envision. That's not the way I'd like to lose it. That's for sure. But yeah, very exciting. He's all jacked up. My wife sent me a picture and one of the kindergarten teachers helped him pull it. So that's very exciting. Appreciate your time today. Dr. Kane does an amazing job. World-class, world-renowned surgeon. Andrews Sports Medicine. We're so lucky to have them in our backyard. So lucky that I haven't come to see you recently, which is a win. But also, if I did, I know I'd be in tremendous, tremendous shape. Dr. Kane, you have a great relationship with Scott Cochran. He now gets the head coaching job at West Alabama. I know him from a coaching standpoint. You know him on a personal standpoint. Help us understand what West Alabama is getting with Scott Cochran.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting for West Alabama. Most people know I've been dealing with the University of Alabama program since 2001, but I've also been the medical director and team physician for the University of West Alabama since 1999, so 25 years. I've been their team physician. And so I've known that program a long time, and I've known Scott since he came with Coach 7 in 07. And, Scott is, as you know, a great motivator, very high energy guy. He was really integral, along with Jeff Allen and some of the other guys involved early in the program, with developing the culture at Tuscaloosa, at University of Alabama with Coach Saban. And I know Scott will do a great job. I think it's a really exciting day. When it first was announced the other day, I thought, why is everybody making such a big deal out of the LeBron trade, the Luka trade, and the AD trade? The biggest news of the day was Scott Cochran going to West Alabama.
Yeah, it was, at least for us, that's for sure. When you think about what a relationship is like between someone like yourself that would be doing the surgery and getting a guy back on the track. I know you work hand in hand with Jeff Allen, the outstanding and I think Hall of Fame athletic trainer in Tuscaloosa. What is your relationship with the strength coach there? How do you guys all kind of work together to get guys back as quickly as you do?
There's actually a lot of interplay between those three disciplines, between medicine, athletic training, and strength. In fact, in the NFL, a lot of the NFL teams now have their strength and conditioning program under the medical program. It's all in under the same house because they really interconnect. When you have somebody that has an injury that we have to deal with or evaluate, how they work out, how they treat it, what they do to regain function. A lot of it is physical therapy, but a lot of it's also strength and conditioning. So, Scott was really involved early on. Going back to 2007 when Coach Saban got here, he's one of those guys that he'll listen to the medical staff, athletic training staff, modify what he does if he needs to for the players. The players love him. He's got a great connection with the players, and I don't think most people, that watch the games understand this, but on a daily basis, the people that have the most interaction with the players are the strength and conditioning program and the athletic training staff because they see him every day. The coaches see him at meetings, they see him at practice, they see him, in the off season. Sometimes they're recruiting and out of town, but the strength staff is there every day. And so, I think the culture that develops in a program is really heavily leans on the strength and conditioning program and the athletic training programs.
So when you think about what a head coach's responsibility is, you've of course worked closely with Coach Saban. You've worked closely with Coach DeBoer. You've been around a lot of head coaches in your time. What are some of the qualities that Scott Cochran brings to the head coaching job? Even though he's never had that role, how are some of the things that he learned while running the strength and conditioning program applicable to running a successful football program?
Yeah, I think in today's world, a head football coach is basically a CEO of a big program. And, at the University of Alabama, it's a $150, $200 million program. At West Alabama is a little smaller, but the same philosophy. It's really, you have to be an organizer. You have to have good organizational skills, which he's certainly learned from two of the best with Coach Saban and Kirby Smart. I think you have to be a motivator. Motivation is a big part of the head coach. They're not coaching every play, day-to-day technique necessarily, but they have to motivate the kids to play their best and be their best. And, he learned obviously from the best with Coach Saban being a motivator, and he's a natural motivator. And I think the last thing is you have to hire good people and recruit good players. And I think Scott has so many connections across the world of football that he'll be able to recruit well. A lot of Division II players come from Division I programs. And so if somebody at Alabama or Auburn or Ole Miss or Oregon or somewhere else, doesn't have the time they want, sometimes they go to Division II, and that's where your talent base comes from. So his connections, not only to get good coaches, but also to recruit good players, I think will be really, really outstanding at Division II level.
Yeah, I'm excited for him. That'll be terrific. We're visiting with Dr. Lyle Kane, does an amazing job at probably as good of an orthopedic surgeon as there is in the world, and he's in our backyard, which is amazing. And he's a really nice guy, which is also cool. Can't say the same for some of his colleagues, but big fan of Dr. Kane for sure. I just know if I have ankle surgery, I'm gonna get a second opinion for sure, ankle and foot. But
my foot and ankle partner made me on the golf course.
Well, I can't blame him. It's pretty nice out right now. I think storms are in the mix though, so hopefully he's being mindful of the weather. Looking at the Super Bowl coming up, you've spent time in working with some guys that are participating in the Super Bowl. What are some of those things that you've had to deal with some of the guys that are going to be participating in Sunday's big game?
Well, obviously the Super Bowl is the biggest sporting event in the U.S. and probably in the world, and it's really fun. I'm sure you've been to some. I've been to 3 or 4 Super Bowls, and they're really a huge spectacle. But at the end of the day, it's a game, between two teams that are trying to win the championship. Similar to stuff we did in college at Alabama over the last several years. I think, for us, every year we do a lot of consulting on NFL players at Andrews Sports Medicine. We get a lot of MRI consultations and end up operating on a lot of NFL players from different teams. This year it's a little unique. The Eagles, just because of their makeup, I counted the other day, I think we've had 10 players from the Eagles that either me or Norman or somebody in our group has operated on the last couple of years. And so we have a pretty tight connection with that group and keep up with those guys. I just talked to Landon Dickerson last week after the last game. And so I think, they're preparing just like they do any other game. I think, playing against the Chiefs, going for a three-peat is a difficult task. The Chiefs are obviously a good team, and it's always hard to bet against Pat Mahomes. He seems to come up big in big games. But, I think in Birmingham and Alabama, we should all be rooting for the Eagles with the amount of talent with Jalen Hurts and Landon Dickerson, Devontae Smith, and Byron Young, and all the guys that are out there that are Alabama players. This is a huge thing for them. Their legacy as an NFL player a lot of times is determined by Super Bowl wins. All-Pro is nice. The money they get is great, obviously, but their long-term legacy is determined by how many Super Bowls they win. So I think this is a big game for Jalen and Devontae and Landon and all those guys, and I really hope they do well. But it'll be fun to watch. I enjoy watching it on my couch instead of being on the sideline sometimes.
Yeah, that's for sure. Definitely a little less stressful. With the rooting interest for sure, but not necessarily one that could directly affect you. I do want to ask you about Landon Dickerson because he was an interesting story. Of course, transferred from Florida State to Bama. In that national championship season of 2020, he tore his ACL. I don't recall what game, but it was at some point, I think well beyond the midway point. It was kind of late in the year, if I remember correctly.
SEC championship game, yeah.
Oh, it was that early. It was that late.
Yeah. So Landon came in, and Landon is a character. I mean, anybody that's seen him on social media or in the press conferences, and you remember he was the guy that the bumper fell off his truck, so he took a railroad tie and bolted it to the front of his truck as a new bumper. And that's kind of the way Landon is. Interesting guy, a really good character guy. And he was kind of the mascot or spirit of the team that year in 2020. He was the leader, I think, psychologically. And he got hurt in the SEC championship game against Florida, and was really adamant that he was going to play the next game, which is after surgery, not advisable. And certainly we weren't going to clear him, but he was pretty dogmatic that he was going to play. And so I made a deal with him. I didn't tell Coach Saban, but I made a deal with him. I said, look, if we get to the national championship game and we're up by 4 touchdowns with under 3 minutes left, and we go to victory formation, we're going to snap the ball and just kneel, I'll let you go in there and snap the ball. And so he focused on that for 2 weeks and really just wouldn't stay out of my ear. He was like a 6-year-old boy. You just told him you're going to take him to the store to get some candy or something. And he was really obnoxious about it. And then we came to the game, and I spent most of the second half trying to get Devontae Smith's finger back in place, and was not successful. But when I came back out of the locker room, we were about to go into victory formation. Landon just kind of jumped the gun and ran out on the field and snapped the ball for the last 3 series. And then he grabs Coach Saban and carries him off the field and almost trips over a player and almost causes trauma to both of them. But really great guy, and he's a guy that'll play with his leg hanging half off. And so he's had some injuries this year, but I don't doubt he'll be a star this weekend, and he'll do a great job for the Eagles.
And finally, Dr. Kane, as we get you out of here, you spent some time with Jalen Hurts. I don't recall anything that was too significant, but surely bumps and bruises. I mean, the guy started a lot of football games. What's he like in your experience with him? I've been around him in one setting, but what has your experience been with him as you've kind of navigated throughout his career?
I think the one thing that stood out about Jalen early on, even if you remember the first game he played against Southern Cal, the first year, his freshman year, he fumbled the first ball. The first snap he ever took, he fumbled and turned it over against USC. When he and Blake Barnett were in a quarterback battle. And the one thing that stood out about Jalen is he's extremely mature. Things don't rattle him, and he's extremely confident. He knows that he's going to make a play when it comes down to it. And so he's one of those guys that, you grow up with, when you're a little kid, everybody aspires to be this person. He's the guy you want with the ball when things are tight at the end of the game, because he's not going to get nerves. He doesn't get anxious. He's very calm and confident. And so I think if the Eagles have the ball late with a chance to win the game, Jalen's going to make the plays. He's that guy. So he's proven it in the NFL. He's not the most skilled thrower in the NFL. He doesn't have the accuracy and arm that Patrick Mahomes has, but he'll make the plays. And so I think he has a great opportunity this weekend to win.
Yeah, he played great in the last time he was out there for sure, but hope he can bring one home. It'd be awesome. I think everybody, I speak for most, a lot of Chiefs fatigue with the Alabama connection. Yeah. Who can possibly push back on having a rooting interest for the Eagles? Dr. Kane, it's always great to visit with you, my friend. Really appreciate your time this morning, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Very good to talk with you. Tell your son to hang in there.
Yeah, I know. If we need emergency surgery, we will call you. I don't think that's going to be necessary to reattach a children's tooth, but if so, we'll call you later. Great stuff. Appreciate you, man. Dr. Kane does an amazing job. We are so blessed to have the best orthopedic group in the world, in my opinion, here in our own backyard. So Andrew Sports Medicine, they've taken great care of me. I know they'll take great care of you. If, God forbid, you ever need them. That's for sure. All right, when we come back, we're going to revisit our conversation from a little earlier. Are you okay with tiered payouts? It's coming. Whether you like it or not, it's probably coming, and it might benefit your school. Is it something that we should celebrate, or is it something we should be concerned about? We'll talk about it next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, Jackson 245. Welcome back, McElroy and Cubelic. Good morning. Jocks 94.5. Bill Smith Buick GMC is the GMC Dealer of the Year. They're Alabama's largest GMC dealership, and they are capable of offering the largest discounts and the best service. Thank you, Alabama, for making them number one. Again, the national championship is given out every year to GMC dealers. They've won it 4 years in a row. They have also won 7 overall. So it's a dynasty up there in Coleman. And lucky for us, it's a short drive up to Coleman, up I-65, exit 310, Highway 31. You can go get yourself a brand new GMC Yukon. That's right, a Yukon Denali XL. So a big vehicle, perfect for the family, luxurious vehicle, comfortable ride. You can go get it for over $10,000 off the sticker price. You can get it for $86,610. That's $10,000 and change off the sticker price. And it's deals like that keep people coming back. That's why 75% of their business is repeat customers, because you have a better experience when you shop with Bill Smith. Take a short drive up to Coleman. Go see Andy Cole. Go see Jonathan Yeager. You'd be glad you did. You can also shop online. Have it delivered right to your driveway at BillSmithBuickGMC.com. We are talking earlier, excuse me, about what's going on with the world of college athletics and revenue distribution, and how it's going to shake things up, and how it's going to be interesting, and how it's probably going to benefit your school. If you're a fan of Alabama, what's going on in the ACC is beneficial to you. It is proving that teams that succeed on the field will be rewarded financially. Now, it might take 10 years to get there, but for all intents and purposes, it's really, really positive. So we talked about this about 30 minutes ago, 35 minutes ago. If you missed the show at any point, you can always download the podcast. That's wherever you get your podcast, just Mac and Cube. Check out the first hour. You'll see it. We started talking about it around 7:30, so the midway point, and kind of detailed and documented what's going on in the ACC, the changes that are happening in the ACC, and how it could have a lasting impact on college sports. They are basically rewarding quality by paying those teams more. And the teams that aren't performing get paid less. Pretty simple concept to me. But it kind of bucks the trend of how college sports has operated for a very, very long time. So we asked for you guys to kind of chime in on a few of these things. You can call the show at 205-834-9450. You can text the show at the exact same number, 205-834-9450. You can tweet the show at Mac and Cube. So I want to get your reaction. Is this something you're excited about? Is this something that concerns you? Do you think this could lead to people being very disgruntled as members of the SEC? You think people are going to be satisfied with this maybe affecting the league that is traditionally just spread it out even across the board? I think it makes sense that you would reward the teams that do the best. I mean, like any other meritocracy, those that perform the best get paid the most. Golf tournament. They don't pay the 13th place golfer the same what they paid the third place golfer. Why? Because their performance didn't warrant equal compensation. So will this be applied in the future? I think it will be. I also think one thing that's also interesting, and we probably not spend a whole lot more time on this. There's a bunch more things that I want to get to. But it's going to be very interesting if, for whatever reason, this is not applied to the SEC, if this is not applied to the Big Ten. Do they basically say, all right, we're out? And does Texas say, all right, we'll just go independent? Like, look at what Notre Dame did last year. Notre Dame just cashed a check for $20 million solo. Now, I don't think that's responsible. I think being associated with the SEC and the Big Ten makes a ton of sense. I would never want to go at it alone unless I'd already been going at it alone for a really long time. Like Notre Dame has proof of concept. They have proof of results. Like if I'm Oklahoma, going independent to me doesn't, that scares the bejesus out of me. It is very dangerous because while there is some upside, there's a lot more downside, in my opinion. I think collectively bargaining in this situation makes sense. That's why the SEC and the Big Ten, they're not going anywhere. At least I don't think it is.
It's interesting because we have one person that texted in. He says spreading equally is what made the SEC the best conference in the country.
I think it has. I think it has for sure. The SEC is tremendously competitive. The gap between, say, as proven last year, the perennial bottom feeder in Vanderbilt and the perennial dominant team for the last 17 years in Alabama, that gap is more narrow than it once was. It's not often that you see Northwestern knock off Ohio State. Indiana beat Indiana has not beaten Ohio State since 1988. That was a perennial bottom dweller. No one's lost more games than Indiana in the history of college football. When was the last time a Rutgers beat Ohio State or Michigan? Doesn't happen as much. In the SEC, the equality across the board has allowed for it to be really, really good and has created some parity. And it's probably going to continue to create more parity here in the years to come.
We have two opposing texts that are coming. This one I thought was interesting. One said, interesting argument, however, related to the golf comparison. In golf, there's always a new guy entering the PGA to backfill folks that don't make it, fail to make the money, have talent to compete, etc. College football needs to support these, quote, lesser teams well enough for there to continue to be competition, or you'll drop the number of participants at the highest level. Question if that's a bad thing, but do you enjoy the occasional variety in the sport? If they're gone, would the TV market shrink?
I think that's a fair question. It's a fair rebuttal. I also think there's a real question as to whether or not the bottom half or the bottom tier or whatever, like the ACC now is rewarding teams. I think they're all getting their 30 million, right? Or whatever the ACC is getting from ESPN. They're all getting their 30 million. It's just what you win in addition to that is going to you and to you alone. So if you make the playoff, you're not splitting it with the other member institutions. Now, I have not seen the contract. I don't know exactly what it states. And maybe it's percentages. Maybe if you finished first, you take home X percentage of the overall take home from let's say the contract's worth, for simple math purposes, let's say the contract's worth $1 billion. Okay, $1 billion. Let's say there's 20 teams in the ACC. There's 17, but just for simple math, let's say the top team takes home 5%. So they get 50. Or that wouldn't make sense. Let's say the top team takes home 10%. They get 100. The bottom team takes home 2%. They get 20. That's a pretty wide gap.
Very massive.
Massive gap. But that 20 is still far better than you would get in most other conferences if you're in the ACC or the SEC. Far more. So, all right, you can take your ball and go join the Sun Belt. That's fine. But guess what? Now you're making $7 million a year or $5 million a year, whatever the circumstances may be. So I don't know if this is going to be, like I said, the beauty of this arrangement is we have now 10 years to identify whether or not this is going to be beneficial for these conferences moving forward. We get to watch the ACC, and in success, it will be applied elsewhere. That's a guarantee. If it's a disaster, it'll probably keep going the way it's always been going. Everyone gets the same.
On the flip side of that, Jody from Tulsa texts in, college sports is not golf. What is the point of a conference if it doesn't seek to elevate all of its members? This is the mindset that allowed Texas to destroy the Southwest Conference and the Big 12.
It's 100% true. But leverage. I mean, who has more power? The collection of, and I'm asking the question, I really don't know. Who has more power? Let's use the ACC as an example because it's fresh. Who has more power? Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina bound together, or the other 13 member institutions? Who has more power? Those four schools together or the ACC as a whole? What is the ACC without those four schools? What was the Pac-12 without USC and Oregon and Washington and Arizona State and Colorado? What were they?
Mountain West, apparently.
The Mountain West.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I think it's just going to be interesting then to watch. And yes, it is the SEC's job. It is the Big Ten's job to elevate all programs. But is that a sustainable model? Is my question. In a perfect world, in an idealistic world, everyone gets paid the same. That's great. In reality, the world's a meritocracy. And I think meritocracy is probably coming to college sports sooner than many people might like. We'll see. It'll be fascinating. We're going to continue that conversation at some point, but probably not anymore today. I do love it, though. I am fascinated by it. I like the college sports business. It's always been interesting to me. I think there are a lot of people that are interested in it, but we can discuss it at a later date. When we come back, I want to kind of give you an update with what went down yesterday. Auburn took care of business in yet another dominant performance. That's now 14 in a row for the Auburn Tigers. We'll give you an update there, and we'll tell you what else is coming up here in the SEC basketball schedule this week. We'll do it next. McElroy and Cubelic Morning, Jocks 145. 8:35 here in Birmingham. It's a great start to a Wednesday. Hope your day is off to a terrific start as well. We know that if your home has a train and the chaos that we're now having as far as the flu season is concerned, you know you're in great shape, because if you want to make your home healthier with Train's Clean Effects Home Cleaner, it removes up to 99.9% of airborne particles, including those that cause virus. It's 100 times more effective than standard air filters and 8 times more effective than HEPA room filters. Find a dealer near you at train.com. The flu, by the way, is everywhere. So everyone's being super mindful of that. I think I've had like 10 friends get sick with it, and it's been supposedly a beast.
I know it was weird because we feel like we don't need it anymore. But when I was at jury duty, I wore a mask because I figured that, look, I'm around a whole bunch of people that I'm not around normally. Yeah, I'm masking up. I don't need to get the flu.
It's the last thing I want. There's nothing I hate more than the flu. Like, it is the worst. I haven't had it in years, knock on wood, and just hoping we can get through this flu season alive. And hey, Train Clean Effects Home Cleaner will help get us there. That's for sure. Tough first half yesterday for Auburn. They eventually pulled away in the second half, 98-70. This recent offensive juggernaut that is the Auburn Tigers is pretty remarkable, man. First half, lot kind of down low, dominant. It's amazing to me how many different ways this team can beat you. Like, it's like one game, it's like, all right, yeah, we're just going to shoot 50% from 3. The next game, it's like, yeah, you know what? We'll just dominate the paint. I mean, out of their first 28 points that they scored, 18 of which were down and around the paint. They shot about 50% with pretty close proximity buckets. It's just amazing to me. And I just continue to be impressed with what we've seen from this team in many different facets. They had 7 blocks in the first half. And after kind of a rough first half shooting the 3, things started to open up in the second half a little bit. They start game 2 of 12. Not great, right? 2 of 12 in the first half from deep. They kind of round things back around and play a little better down the stretch. They finished the second half 6 of 14, but still not elite by any stretch, but still a little bit better. Second half, they started kind of on fire there a little bit for sure. Denver Jones was 3 for 3. Pettiford added 3 of 8. I mean, it's just a lot of ways that this team can kind of create some problems. Great on defense. Few too many fouls, feels like 17 fouls. Oklahoma shot 29 free throws. But for the most part, pretty dominant performance, especially in the second half. So Auburn keeps rolling along. Very impressive to watch that team. They continue to seemingly get better every week. And it's like they just are relentless, man. Really, really interesting.
It was a way that the way that they won this game, it just kind of showed everyone that they don't need Broom or Baker Mazzara out here to beat you, not only beat you, but beat you convincingly. They don't want, if it had been 70-72, okay, fine, they had bad games, but they found a way to win. No, they won convincingly. Again, you mentioned Denver Jones was 3 for 3 from 3. He didn't miss a basket at all.
Yeah.
Perfect on his free throws, perfect on regular field. Like, he made every single shot. And Pettiford, like you say, went 3 from 8 from behind the arc. So it's not just the big names of Janai Broom and Chad Baker Mazzara that can come out and beat you. And Auburn's looking like an absolute tough out for the rest of the season.
Beast. They can beat you in so many different ways. They can beat you even on nights when they're having a tough night shooting it. They can beat you in nights if it wants to become a race to 100. Let's go. We can go. Just really, really impressive to watch. And another good win last night at home for the Auburn Tigers. Looking a little bit further, and told you earlier in the show we were going to talk a little bit about this. We don't spend a ton of time about this. It's not my favorite topic here in the beginning of February, but I think it's important to start kind of taking into account. And we're 5 weeks away from things getting underway. And right now, the analytics department at ESPN, they are accounting for 18 teams that are currently locks to the NCAA tournament. It should probably come as no surprise that the SEC has 3 of those 18 teams. The Auburn Tigers, lock. Alabama, lock. And Tennessee Volunteers, lock. Those 3 teams are locks right now. 100% certainty. I don't know if you can ever say 100%, but it does feel kind of appropriate when looking at the dominance of those teams. If they were to lose every game down the stretch, they might still make the tournament. Not sure that that would be the best thing to do. I don't think I'd try it. But as of right now, they are officially, quote, lock status at 100%. Now, the way ESPN quantifies lock status, I quantify lock status at 100%. You have a 100% chance of making the field, that's a lock. 95% is not a lock.
No.
I feel pretty good about it.
Correct.
I'm not a mathematician here. But you're telling me that there's a 1 in 20 chance that teams won't make the field. That doesn't really feel like a lock to me. Just saying. I know it might be highly unlikely, but you're saying there's a chance. So the teams that they would quantify as locks, I, however, would not. They also say Florida is a lock at this point. They're at 97%. Texas A&M is at 96%. Not locks in my eyes, but dang near. Maybe a win or two more. Maybe a week or two from now, we will bump them up to 100% and they will officially be locks. Now, the teams that are very close to being locks at the moment. Kentucky, they're at 93%, but I don't know, man. I don't know.
Wait, you're telling me 96% is a lock, but 93 isn't?
90,
but they are?
That's,
okay.
Don't shoot the messenger. I have nothing to do with this.
Okay, all right.
I'm just trying to figure out, as someone that was above remedial level in math, I've always thought locks are 100% certainty. 96% is a lock. 93% is not. I'm not sure what that means, but that's the way things are working right now in this analytics world that we are currently living in. But I look at Kentucky, and I'm not suggesting that they are a bad program. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I think teams are starting to figure them out. If you want me to be completely honest, they've lost 4 out of 5, guys, including a win last night at Ole Miss. They lost at home to John Calipari and won win Arkansas going into that game. They lost at Vandy. I mean, Vandy's 4-5. Kentucky's 4-5 in the SEC, 15-7 overall. And guess what? It doesn't get much better. Guess what? Hey, yeah, you've lost 4 out of 5. Yeah, okay. You can probably handle South Carolina. They're the worst team in the league. That's who they have next. But guess what? A week from yesterday, they take on Tennessee. That's not exactly a get-right recipe. And then after that, they're at Texas, who, like them, are sitting there at 4-5 in the league and are needing to make a move. And it's on the road. And it's a midweek game. And it's coming off of what will likely be a war against Tennessee. They still have a road trip to Alabama. They still have to play Auburn. And they still have a road trip to the 15th ranked Missouri Tigers. I'm not saying they're going to miss the field. I'm just saying I wouldn't want to be them right now with how they started and how they're currently playing. The Texas Longhorns are right behind them at 92% to make the field. Also, a team that feels like they're kind of trending in the wrong direction. I wonder too, and I think a lot of people have wondered this. I wonder if when you look at the SEC, if it becomes a little bit like football in the sense that, man, you just got to survive. Like just whatever you do, don't finish like 5-15 in the league and you'll be all right. Just survive, hang in there, hover around 500 in the league and you'll be in great shape.
That Duke win, no matter what's always going to look good.
Yes.
It's a lot like Alabama in the football season, that as much as they may have stumbled once or twice, they still had that Georgia win to fall back on. So just don't screw this up, Kentucky, because you've got that Duke win to fall back. Just find a way to survive, and you should be okay.
I think Kentucky will be all right. I think Texas is going to be all right. But I don't know for sure at this point if I'm comfortable enough putting them at 92% likely to make the field. They have a 3-7 record against 3 top 50 BPI teams. And they're 39th in strength of record. All very good numbers. They're 25th in net. They're 4-0 against teams in the second quadrant. Like quad 2 wins, 4-0, pretty good. Like not bad. I think they're probably going to be in. But to quantify them as a lock, probably not there yet. Mississippi State, they're at 82%. They've lost 5 of their past 7. They also have a very difficult schedule down the stretch. Have you seen Mississippi State's schedule down the stretch? Goodness gracious alive. I mean, gosh. They're at Georgia. I think people that have watched Georgia team this year, they're not a team that I don't think anyone would pick to win the SEC, but they're scrappy, and they're not a team that you really want to mess with, especially on the road. You got Florida the week after that. You got Ole Miss on the road the game after that. That's a week from Saturday. You got at Ole Miss after that. Excuse me. I already said Ole Miss. You got A&M after that. Then you're at Oklahoma. Then you're at Alabama. I mean, God, we could be looking at a situation here in a couple days. And right now, Mississippi State is sitting at 16-6. Right, 16-6. Are they capable of beating Florida at home? Of course they are. Are they capable of beating A&M at home? Yeah, absolutely. Will they be favored in either game? Probably not. So at Georgia, Florida at home, at Ole Miss, A&M at home, at Oklahoma, at Alabama. This could be a team that is sitting there having lost 5 of 6 here in the next 6 games. They've already lost 3 of 4.
5 of 7 overall.
And 5 of 7 overall, including losses against their schedule is just not fair. They did get a win against Ole Miss. They did get a win on the road at South Carolina, the worst team in the league. But they've lost against Bama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, Missouri, and Kentucky in their last 7 games. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And finally, the team that is right there in really good shape is the Ole Miss Rebels. They are sitting at 81% likely. But I don't know how that's right because they beat Kentucky on Tuesday night. They're number 19 in strength of record. They're number 23 in the net. They're above 500 in the SEC. How is it that some of these teams sitting in front of them that are below 500 in the SEC, I understand non-conference, I get that, but Ole Miss seems to be kind of trending in the right direction, whereas other teams seem to be trending down. I kind of think Ole Miss should be up there a little bit higher. I've seen Ole Miss give a lot of teams fits, and even in some close games, they might have been able to make the case that they were the better team. Yeah, okay, they lost to Purdue in the non-con. They lost at Memphis in the non-con. They have a win over Alabama. They did lose 3 in a row, but they've now responded after losing to Auburn by beating Kentucky at home. Now they go to LSU, to South Carolina, 2 games they should win before hosting Mississippi State on the 15th. They should be in good shape. I think they're in great shape. I think they should feel real good about where they're heading. But it'll be interesting, man. The SEC basketball slate is just incredible. I don't think it's possible to get any better than this. I mean, it's seriously, every single night is just a grind. And we have a lot of good games looking forward to tonight as well. Last night was excellent. Mentioned Auburn already. Florida beat Vanderbilt. That was another game in the SEC. Ole Miss, of course, referenced this one already. Ole Miss beat Kentucky last night. Very impressive 98-point showing. They were dominant there in the first half. I mean, it never at any point felt like Kentucky was going to win that game. Tonight's slate also got some good ones coming up. Missouri, number 15, Missouri, is on the road at Tennessee. So a good one coming up there as well. Just so many good games every single night. You got good action in the SEC. You got Arkansas, Texas as well. You got LSU at Georgia, if you're into that sort of thing. Also on the SEC network at 8 o'clock local time. All right, when we come back, need some jury duty stories. Jury duty stories from John Saber next on McElroy and Cubelic Morning, Jock 94.5. 8:53 here in Birmingham. John Saber, less than 24 hours removed from jury duty, doing his civic duty. Saber, help me understand this.
Okay.
Was your jury duty experience as illuminating as mine was about a year ago? Or 6 months ago, 5 months ago? I don't even know how long ago it was. Who cares?
It did help reinforce my my love of the country, even though it did feel a little weird when the judge finally comes out. I was supposed to be there at 8:30. We all got seated about 8:50. So it was interesting. It's like 8:30. We're wondering whether or not we can go into the courtroom, and we see people like in suits come walking by and walking to the side door. I'm like, oh, okay. So your job starts at 8:30, not if you're on time, you're early. Okay, one of those. Oh, okay, all right. So
the old on time you're early thing.
Go figure. So we sit down, and of course we have to rise for the judge. I thought that was just when court's in session. But anytime when the judge comes out, all rise. So all right, cool. That hey, I'm in your house. Got to play by your rules. And then so we're expected to sit down after, and goes, oh, I'd like you to please continue standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was like, okay. Not that I'm against pledging my allegiance to it, but I thought I thought that was a high school thing in elementary school. Yeah,
the pledge is back.
We're doing that now. All right, cool. So he gets up and we do the pledge, sits everyone down. It's like, all right, I know everyone's not happy to be here, but you are doing your civic duty, and I just want to remind you that it's the greatest country in the world. And I know a lot of you are thinking, oh, there's one thing I did have to do. Everyone was sitting down because I guess you sit in the bench areas, kind of like pews, like in church.
Yes.
We're sitting there, but there were more than 200 people there, and that started to fill up. So the lady was like, "Oh, you can go. You don't have to sit in there. You can go sit on, in the jury area and the other part." So as I'm walking up, I see there are a couple spots open where the jury normally would sit in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And then you could sit where the lawyers normally sit. Well, the right side is taken that's closest to the jury box. And the lady's like, "Oh, you can sit here." And I was like, "Ma'am, I've prided my life never having been a defendant in court. I'm not taking a chance now, even though I know it ain't for me. I'm not setting this precedent. So I'll find somewhere else to sit." And that the judge comes out whatever later, and then he says, "I know a lot of you aren't happy to be here, but the thing about it is you're help solidifying how jury trial is the best way to do something, because you even though you may not think you could be in this situation, trust me, you could be in here, because I, as a judge, someone hit me and then they sued me, and I had to convince a jury of my peers that I was not at fault." I was like, oh, you know what? Even though I don't plan on ever going to court or having to do like that, doesn't mean somebody else has plans for me. It's like, you know what? Okay, fine. So I did my civic duty, and you know what? I'm happy I did it.
Unreal. I am kind of amazed that if there's one takeaway for Saber, is that he became more patriotic.
He did
after serving
2 days
as a jury member. I'm proud of you.
Maybe the pledge did work. Who knew?
You know what? We're gonna start doing it before the show every day.
America.
Sam McKewon talking Nebraska next. Welcome back. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Jack 94.5. Sam McKewon coming up here in just a moment. Talk a little Nebraska. A lot of kind of news coming out of Nebraska, especially with Matt Rule's thoughts on the spring game and how it could positively or negatively affect his team. One thing that will never negatively affect you is your experience that you'll have at Bromberg's. Bromberg's is one of a kind. They are the very best. I've been going there for years and years and years. That's where I've chosen to purchase many, many pieces for my family, for my wife, for friends, for godchildren, you name it. Everything comes from Bromberg's. We have been very happy with the experience we've had, and we know you guys will have the exact same when you go and check them out, and you ought to, because we know Valentine's Day is around the corner. If you're late and you haven't had much of a chance to kind of explore what's available around Valentine's Day, go and check out Bromberg's. You can get a Vietri glass vase, which is handmade in Italy, on February 13th and 14th. If you buy one of those 2 days, you get a free bouquet of flowers. You also can get a gold-plated heart charm that can be specially personalized for only $28. So that offering is available February 13th at the Summit, February 14th in Mountain Brook Village. So always go and make your home at Bromberg's. Sam McKewon does an amazing job, and I've been reading his stuff for a very long time and always very appreciative of the perspective that he's able to give us. You can see a lot of his work on the Omaha World Herald. You can follow him on Twitter or X at SWMcKewenOWH. Sam, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Very good. I'm fascinated by this Nebraska football team this year. We are in Birmingham. We're kind of all over, but like we primarily base out of Birmingham, and it's remarkable how much interest there is in Nebraska football in this community. I think people just align with Nebraska. I think they believe, whether they're Alabama or Auburn fans, like they grew up watching Nebraska dominate. And I think there's a lot of people in our part of the world that would like to see that happen again. Maybe not beating Alabama, but they would like to see them in the mix. So how close are they to being at a point, Sam, where they can compete amongst the biggest brands in the sport?
Well, I mean, I think they are in that they've kind of reached that second tier. For years, they had not obviously made a bowl game. Now they've reached that sort of second tier where they're a postseason team. And in the college football playoff universe, teams are never that far away so long as they're postseason and they got quarterbacks coming back. And so, Indiana, paid the path. And Indiana beat Nebraska badly last year, 56-7. But Indiana paid the path, and I've seen Illinois now mentioned with potential college football playoff teams in 2025, and Nebraska and Illinois went to overtime last year. So it's a combination of things. Do they have the roster? I think the roster's pretty good. Do they have the quarterback? Yeah, they do. They do have a good quarterback. Do they have a favorable enough schedule? Are they not playing Michigan's schedule from last year? They are not playing Michigan's schedule from last year. So I think it is favorable. There's a chance. It's outside. It's an outside chance. But there's a chance they can make the CFP. And any team that makes a CFP has to be considered part of a conversation for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Obviously, Indiana and SMU probably won't be back in 2025, but they got there, and they can say they got there, and any team that says they got there can build upon that. And so I think Nebraska is closer than it's been in a very long time. And if Nebraska gets good, the one thing that's true about this place that's similar to Alabama is the money is here and the support is here. So, the money is there. They will financially support it in ways that I think Indiana and SMU will struggle to duplicate because of their histories in the sport.
When you look at what Matt Rule has done in a pretty short period of time, I know he had a NIL war chest. They were able to really rally the troops and generate a lot of buzz and interest. I mean, he said no, I think once, maybe twice before he said yes, partly because he needed everyone to have alignment. And it's kind of remarkable what Trevor Alwich was able to do in the pitch he was ultimately able to make to get him to consider Nebraska when he really didn't have to. He chose to, and now look at the results. What do you think has been the most impressive thing he's done to date outside of recruiting Dylan Raiola, which I think most people would probably point to?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of things. One, Rule's nature and his leadership skills really do lend itself to the current modern college football coach, the CEO. I think a really good coach today has got to have their hands on pretty much everything, and they can't They can't get overly bogged down in the play-by-play stuff, like designing the game plan every week. And that Rhule's skill set lends itself to being good at that. So I think he's been very good there. And then I also think he's a culture setter. And he's a culture setter in 2025. Now, there are coaches, they're culture setters in, 1998, and they're not necessarily 2025 guys. And Rhule is. Rhule's comfortable with the current 18 to 22-year-old. One of the things that he said on Saturday, for example, he's like, well, I can deal with a guy being mad at me. I can deal with a guy even yelling at me. I can deal with going back and forth with a guy. The one thing I won't tolerate is ingratitude. And what he means by that is, like, you got to treat the little people and the people, whatever you want to call it, you got to treat those people well. If you treat those people well, then he can roll with you to some degree. And that's kind of how you got to be with young people today. You're not going to be able to tell a 21-year-old transfer, hey, do this, 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 and this, and don't even ask me why, because you just got to do it. Rhule's willing to supply that why, and he's willing to be, he doesn't necessarily require being a father figure. I think he wants to be like the cool uncle, or, I always think about him as like the uncle from The Bear, like that character. Like, he's smart, he's wise, he knows how to kind of keep people in line. That guy, and he has a skill set with young people.
Visiting with Sam McKewon does a great job covering the Nebraska Cornhuskers and all the different things going on with Nebraska athletics, more so than just football. You can check him out at SW McKewon, McKewonOWH. It stands for Omaha World Herald. Looking at Nebraska's schedule and what they need to kind of avoid. Everyone's trying to find that next Indiana. I think Nebraska's kind of a trendy pick for that. Understandably, with the progress that's been made already. But when you look at their schedule, is it as gettable as some people have suggested?
Well, I mean, I think there's some decent teams on it. I like the fact that their toughest non-conference game is Cincinnati. And because Cincinnati needs money for its revenue sharing, they're going to move. Well, Cincinnati's going to say that, but they're moving the game from Indianapolis to Arrowhead Stadium.
Yeah.
Which makes it a Nebraska home game. Nebraska will put 60,000 fans in there. So Cincinnati, because it obviously wants money, is willing to move that game. Now, they'll get the gate, but Nebraska will get the fans. And so that's the non-conference game to watch. And then, at the end of September, they play Michigan in Lincoln. And that's a very, very big game. Sharon Moore's teams are going to be tough, just the way the Jim Harbaugh's teams were. I don't know that they're terribly skilled. I think Michigan's got some skills, not overwhelming skill, but people who watch them beat Alabama know that Michigan will bring a culture of physicality to every game, and you can't take plays or games off against Michigan. So, I think that's a very, very big game. Late in the season, they go to Penn State. Penn State's going to be really good. They play Iowa again. Outside of that, I mean, the schedule's pretty manageable. They get USC and UCLA again. They host USC. They go out to UCLA. That's another situation where Nebraska will have 20,000 fans at the game. I couldn't tell you at this moment how good UCLA is going to be. They got some players there. They kicked Nebraska's butt this season. I don't know if they've got a quarterback to replace the guy that just left.
UCLA is one of those weird teams. I always kind of forget about them, and then I remember they had a couple good moments there, and peaking with the performance that they had against Nebraska. 3 new coordinators with Dana Holgorsen coming in. I think it's an upgrade over Marcus Satterfield. No disrespect.
Yeah,
I think that the Holgorsen is at least he's gonna create some entertainment value if nothing else. How long will it take for that offense to maybe get going under Dana Holgorsen?
I think it'll get going relatively quickly. I mean, I think one of the things Holgorsen wants to do is he knows he's got a good quarterback in Raiola. Raiola's got a good arm. He's a smart guy, smart kid, and pretty easygoing. Like, he's not gonna flip out if something goes wrong. The one thing about Dylan, he's not much of a runner.
Yeah.
So I think if Satterfield had a running quarterback who could also throw it, like if he had a Baker Mayfield, I think it would have looked different. But I think what they need is to get the ball out of Dylan's hands, get it into the hands of playmakers, and they got to do that quickly. And there were times last season when Dylan's holding on to the ball 4 or 5 seconds. They're running, they're running 3 24-yard routes downfield, and it just isn't working because he doesn't reset the field easily. Like, he doesn't get out and pirouette and, do all the things Lamar Jackson could do or other guys Nebraska's had. I mean, they didn't have Lamar. But my point is that, like, he doesn't reset the field really easily, so you've got to have some routes underneath and things like that. So Dana's going to get that done. I think that's encouraging. People seem to like him. He came in here and kind of lit a fire under people's butts. There were a couple guys who were like, yeah, I'm kind of a starter. What are you going to do about it? And he benched them. So, he took them in, like, they didn't play as much. And so, like, they needed that. They needed to put that fire under some people. And so I think he caught everybody's attention. And I think he'll be good for Nebraska. The defensive coordinator is John Butler, longtime Buffalo Bills secondary guy. He coached Micah Hyde, obviously, who just retired today. They got a big brain trust on defense, including Matt Rule. And then their special teams coordinator is a guy that's been at Tennessee for 4 years now. They just hired him, Mike Eckler.
Right.
And Tennessee special teams is pretty good. So, like, Nebraska feels pretty good about that hire. And I think their coordinator situation is better than it was last year, even if they had a really good coordinator in Tony White lead for Florida State.
Yeah, and that's a loss, but not one that I think can be, not one that I think can't be filled. Like, I think Tony White's a good coach, really good coach. I think they'll be just fine. I really believe that. Visiting with Sam McKewon of the Omaha World Herald, talking a little Nebraska football. Matt Rule made a bunch of headlines with deciding to cancel the spring game and saying it doesn't do them any good. And the injury factor is one, but he cited more because of potential poaching and teams that would potentially target his players if they performed well in a spring game setting. How much merit do you think how much of this is about merit? Like, is this a reality? Is this something that he's actually concerned about, or are they just trying to kind of appease the players not wanting to play in a spring game? I'm curious.
I think there's a little bit of sincere feeling there. He rarely says things without intention. I think that's one thing I would say about Matt Rule is he's a pretty intentional guy when it comes to stuff like this. And so, like, he means it. And I think they've been frustrated with the number of athletes that they feel like they've found that were under the radar that have suddenly been, taken by other teams, or they leave Nebraska and they want to go somewhere else. The thing with Wisconsin, the player who left there and went to Miami, that hits people a certain way because he didn't go in the portal. He just went to Miami, and now, like, Wisconsin basically has to prove that Miami reached out to the guy, and then nobody really knows what's going to happen. I think there's a feeling at this point that the NCAA is just helpless to really do anything. And so I think, Rule is taking precautions to make sure that, there isn't a player that people are watching and say, well, why don't you go find out who his parent is, and let's just reach out and third party it. And he doesn't have to go into the portal. He can just leave the school, and he can show up at the school unannounced, and there you go. Like, that kind of stuff can happen. And until we get real guardrails around it, I think it's going to be challenging. Revenue sharing hits on July 1st. So one of the things that Rule said last week was that, hey, before then, everybody's putting a lot of NIL money up front. And so until the revenue sharing hits, the third party stuff is pretty live. So I think that's part of what he was going for. And I do understand where he's coming from.
Makes perfect sense. Sam, we'll get you out of here with this, and we appreciate the time. Them cutting down to a 105-man roster feels like it might have a unique effect on a program like Nebraska, partly because Nebraska, Iowa, several other programs there in the Midwest have long had a very proud walk-on tradition. And now walk-ons they're just fewer opportunities. How does this limitation from a roster standpoint impact Nebraska, maybe more so than some other programs?
Well, it hits at the soul a little bit of what Nebraska football is about, that, there were kids that could come here and really give them all of themselves for 4 years in exchange for maybe a handful of snaps on senior day and be the ultimate practice player and give the ultimate look, sort of the Rudy-like situation. And there were, that hits at the soul. But to be clear, if you go back and look at the walk-on program that Nebraska had in the 90s, first of all, there were kids in Nebraska that weren't getting recruited because the nature of recruiting back then was different than it is now. So if you look at the scholarship offers of kids in Nebraska now, there's like 15 to 17 kids getting offered D1 scholarships most years. A lot of those kids wouldn't have been offered that back then. And so, like, the players are better known now. So some of the kids they would have gotten as walk-ons, oh my God, they're a starter in year 3 and they start for 3 years and then they're going to the NFL. Some of those guys would be picked up by Kansas or Northern Illinois or Boise State or North Dakota State. And then I think the other piece is that, you know, they knew this going in and it's a tough reality and you have to adjust the best you can. I do believe that Nebraska will try to keep about 10 spots of that 105 to cultivate the sort of like culture guys that they've long had in the walk-on program. You know, you wouldn't call them 5 stars, but you call them 5 hearts. That's what we joke about them right around here. And that's kind of what it is, you know? So like, I think they'll figure it out. Walk-ons aren't quite what they used to be. Like they used to get walk-ons. You're like guys that turned into All-Americans. You're like, how in the world did they end up there? And it's like, well, nobody knew who they were, you know, and now they do. Like you can't, if Nebraska wants a kid out of the state of Nebraska, they got to like offer them when they're sophomores and juniors because Iowa's here and Iowa State's here. Iowa State's probably going to get a kid this cycle, and their top tight end is from a small town in Nebraska. So like people know this place now. And then the other thing is the FCS has changed. You go to South Dakota State or North Dakota State today, that's a pretty darn good football program, and they got a cafeteria. They got all this stuff. And so some of these kids are like, instead of walking on at Nebraska, I'm going to go play at SDSU and I'm going to enjoy that experience. It'll be different than Nebraska, but it's still a good one. Sure. And that's the other thing that I think is kind of eaten into Nebraska's walk-on, Paul, is the success of those teams in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, there's certainly been an awful lot of success for sure. I can't tell you how much we appreciate the time, Sam. This has been terrific. Really hope to have you on again soon, my friend.
All right, take care anytime.
All right, very good. Sam McKewon here, joining us from the Omaha World Herald. You can check out his work on X. You can follow him at SW McKewon, McKewonOWH on Twitter. So check him out there. Really good stuff, good perspective. And I want to kind of follow up that conversation with where are some of the blue bloods? Like, would it be advantageous for college sports to have Nebraska back in the mix? Do you want them back in the mix? You can answer that question by calling the show at 800-239-9569. You can also text the show at 205-834-9450. Is a healthy Nebraska mean a healthier college football landscape? That's the question. We appreciate Sam for joining us on the Buyers Right hotline for all your insurance, financial, and HR needs. It's Buyers Right Insurance, a Higginbotham partner. When we come back, talking blue bloods, their health, and their importance next on McElroy and Cubelic Morning, Jock 94.5. Welcome back. 922. Good visit there with Sam McKewon of the Omaha World Herald. A lot of interesting stuff going on right now as it relates to Nebraska, some of the noise around Nebraska, shrinking the roster down from 133 guys to 105 guys. There's some things that are changing in college football, and I do think Nebraska is one of those programs where they are really important to people. Will probably push back on that. Say they we can get by without them. That's fine if you feel that way. I think that traditional powers, stories of redemption, stories of resurrection align with people. I really believe that. Maybe I'm naive. I think at first, at least, it's a good story. Is there fatigue at the end? Sure. Like, was there Bama fatigue at the end of the unstoppable run that was, a 5-year period with 3 or 4 national championships? Yeah. Like, I can see where people would be tired of that. But at first, it's like, this is fun. This is new. It's exciting. And I think Nebraska is one of those programs that I'm not suggesting that Iowa fans are going to buy Nebraska jerseys or make contributions to Nebraska's NIL. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not saying Minnesota will either, or Wisconsin, or Ohio State, or Oklahoma. No, heck no. Like, they're not going to support their rival, but I'm saying as a greater good, as a fan that supports the health of the sport, Nebraska being good is good. Notre Dame being good is good. Michigan being good is good. Ohio State being good is good. These are real difference makers, if you want me to call it that. They help. They help the bottom line. And then being impactful and then being competitive is valuable. Damian, for us, for our generation, I'm 36 years old. Nebraska is one of those teams. Miami is one of those teams. Florida State is one of those teams. Florida is one of those teams. Who are the teams for you that you think you need, your generation, to maximize your college football experience? Who are the teams that you need to be competitive on an annual basis?
Off the rip, we have Notre Dame, Miami, Florida State, and now since they're starting to get back to it, Tennessee. Tennessee is one. Because for a period of time, it kind of just, it was very similar to Nebraska. It was, okay, yeah, I've realized like they're good, but they're not as good as they used to be.
Sure.
And I think I'd probably put Virginia Tech in there based off of just the Beamer history, where I kind of called it on the tail end of it, where no matter what, it wasn't like they were going out there being national championship contenders, but they were always in a bowl game. So they were never terrible, but they were never consistently elite. But they always stayed in that good range. And I think for a period of time, it was not to the level that they're at now, but Georgia was like that for a while too, where it was, okay, they're good, they have great moments, but now in the later, you pretty much for the past decade or so, they've been up in the conversation of being the elite of the elites. And I would throw Clemson in there. It's like the modern day, since Dabo Swinney's taken over for the past, 10, 15 years. As long as Clemson stays within the conversation, they still are the driving force as far as the ACC is concerned.
I think Clemson is one that makes sense. Like, I don't think they've really gone anywhere.
Right.
It's hard for me to really include them. A good one is Tennessee. I think Tennessee being back is good. Mm-hmm. Whether you like them, dislike them, hate them, love them, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, it doesn't matter. Them being impactful, the third Saturday in October mattering, third Saturday in October being competitive is good for the sport. It was one of 3 or 4 regular season games last year that did more than 10 million viewers.
Yeah. And I would say USC as well. I'd put USC in that category too, because it's the historic value that they bring on top of them being in Los Angeles. So like all eyes are consistently on them. And when they're not good, they just, it's hard for them. It's kind of hard to comprehend how they can just go from, the dominance that they had for so long to barely even scratch the middle of the pack.
I think SC is a great one, because SC is one of those programs that when I was 15, 16 years old, it never felt like they were going to lose a game. You know what I mean? Like it felt like they were one of those unstoppable machines. Remember, this was the Reggie Bush era, the Matt Leinart era, the Pete Carroll era early on, 2003. Carson Palmer won the Heisman in 2002, I believe. And that's when they kind of started going. They played Brad Banks in the Orange Bowl and they killed Brad Banks in Iowa. And it was like, oh boy, they're just getting started. Then they play Auburn the next year. It's like, oh, well, they're going to an SEC school. See how they handle that. And they smoke them. It's like, all right, these guys are for real. I guess they're back. It's really interesting, I think, when you take everything into account, how many programs there are that would be beneficial to the bottom line. SC is one. Tennessee is one. All the schools that we've referenced already, Florida State's been around. They haven't gone anywhere. Miami has kind of fallen off at times, but they now appear like they're kind of back into a point where they're competitive annually. I'll give you another one in the ACC. Like Virginia Tech being good was awesome back in the early 2000s. Now, they were not a program that has historically had great success. But for my generation, for the 36-year-old dude from Texas that loved sports, loved college football, there was no more exciting player than Michael Vick. Not one. Like there was not a single kid, and you could probably go back in my fifth grade yearbook and we can count what percentage of the kids were wearing Michael Vick Falcons jerseys in their yearbook picture. I would be willing to bet it was more than 10%. In a class of like 100, there were probably 10 people wearing Michael Vick jerseys. Whether it was red or black or the away jersey, someone was wearing a Michael Vick jersey. It was remarkable. Really, really remarkable. Saber, do you have a program that kind of jumps off the page to you where if they're good, the sport is healthy?
We're kind of seeing it now, even though, yes, I know they just won a title a couple years ago, but Michigan.
Yeah, for sure.
Michigan had been kind of an afterthought for countless, even with Harbaugh. It only took them the last couple of years, maybe or maybe not, cheating, maybe. Well, we'll see. That's for the courts to decide. But it felt like a lot of college football just wanted to hate them. And that's something that I think the sports needs to, like collectively and overall. This last year showed that there wasn't really an elite team.
Yeah.
And with Nick Saban out, there's not really that one team that more or less everyone, if not hates, at least has strong feelings toward. And right now you don't have that. And maybe that's why we're trying to wish like some of these teams come back. Yeah, some of them have been down, like your USC's, your Nebraska's, your Virginia Tech's, but there's not just that one, if not dominant elite team, not just that one team that everyone hates. And I don't know, maybe under Ryan Day having just won the title, maybe Ohio State can do that, but they out here with a brand new staff and no one, so we're about to see. But definitely, to me, one of the first ones that stood out was Michigan, because it was that I mean, it's called the rivalry.
Yeah,
I know we around here gravitate towards the Iron Bowl, but yes, it's the game.
Right.
So with it being one-sided for the last little bit, it's kind of lost its luster. So Michigan being good again, I think would help the sport.
It definitely has. Another one that I think right now, and they haven't been down for too long. I mean, they're 4 years removed from a close call in a playoff race, and that's the Florida Gators. Like the Florida Gators, when I was in school, were the alpha dog program, and they were the top dogs. Like they were the team to beat. They were perennially great. And you knew that if you wanted to go win an SEC title, you had to go win a national title. Like those were your goals. You had to go through Florida. And that was sometimes you succeed, sometimes you fail, but guess what? They're going to be standing in your way. So you better take care of business when you get that opportunity. And I think them being back, if this year is a year where they can take a step, that would be enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, enormous for the sport, enormous for the rivalry between Georgia and Florida, much like Texas or Tennessee and Alabama. That rivalry has now become very meaningful the last 3 years. Well, when was the last time Georgia and Florida felt like it was, man, everything is weighing on this outcome? Feels like it's been a little while, since at least 2020. And at that point, Georgia was good, but they weren't what they are today. 2 years in a row they won the national championship in 21 and 22. So I would love to see the best version of Georgia against the best version of Florida.
Yeah.
We now know what Georgia's capable of over the last few years. Like, they are legit. They are an alpha dog program. Florida kind of owned them for a very long time. What if Florida gets back and that rivalry becomes elite, almost on the same level as an Alabama LSU, where it's really for dominance within not a division anymore, but dominance for, winner of that game's playing in the SEC championship. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So be interesting to see. I would love for Oklahoma to get back to too. I know they're not that far removed. I know they're not that far removed from being a team that won a lot of conference championships, but like, I grew up Oklahoma. It's like, golly, they were dominant and they won the conference every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they've had success under Lincoln Riley. I get it. They made the playoff, but they never felt like a real national championship contender.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you knew they were going to get steamrolled in the playoff every time they made it. Now, in the game against Georgia back in 2017, they were good. At the Rose Bowl game, they went to overtime and Georgia beat them. They were amazing that year, but that was about the only time Oklahoma in the last 15 to 16 years felt like they could legitimately win the Natty. Like, they've been good, but when have you ever thought that they could actually get the job done at the highest levels of the sport? In your lifetime, Damian, you were born in what year?
96.
How many times have you seen a national championship contending Oklahoma? I know they've played in it, but how often were they even competitive in those national championship games?
Outside of that Oklahoma-Georgia matchup, it hadn't been too many times where I felt, because it's always been defense, because like it was the mantra of the Big 12. They'll average 50 points a game on offense, but most defenses will probably average giving up 48. So it was always the shootout aspect of it, but I never really felt confident that, Oklahoma could find a way, because their defense could never stop anybody. And I think now, with them being in the SEC, they've got the brand and they've got the history, but it's okay. You have to prove your worth consistently once you get into this league.
Yeah.
And I think Oklahoma has kind of fallen victim to that, because, they just haven't been consistently as dominant in any facet.
Yeah. It'd be interesting, man. Curious to get y'all's take on it. If we missed any that are on your mind, text the show, 205-834-9450. You can call the show, 800-239-9569. You can tweet the show at Mac and Cube. So curious. I think we all have different perspectives. I think a little bit is generational, but I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say. I'm also always interested to know, how many different ways can Polar Bear Services help me? Polar Bear Services has done so many things around my home. They've been amazing. They've helped me with plumbing. They've helped me with electrical. They've helped me with small appliances. They have also helped me with my HVAC, and that's something they've always been able to do for me. They have recently added additional ways to help you around your house, but the HVAC is their specialty, and they've been serving this community for a very, very long time. So if you have any problems, remember, if you have a problem with your electrical, plumbing, heat or air, by the way, heat or air, they can make sure that during flu season, things are clean. They can keep your home healthy. So call them if you have some concerns about that. They can get you helped out there. So remember, if you have a problem with your electrical, plumbing, heat, or air, just pick up the phone and call the Bear. It's 205-497-BEAR. That's 497-BEAR. All right, your reaction here coming up in a moment. And I do want to tell you about some way too early win totals that were posted yesterday. We'll talk about a couple of them next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Jackson 845. 9:39 here, Birmingham, Alabama. Shannara Flooring. We know that replacing your floor is a big decision, and finding a flooring company that you can trust, feel good about, can be even more difficult. Will they show up on time? Will they respect your home? Will they get the job done right? I've actually had a flooring contractor before that did not get the job done right, and it was a huge headache. So I know the importance of putting a contractor in charge of something that is very precious to your home. That's for sure. That's why at Shannara Flooring, they've built their team on a foundation of trust and integrity. Whether you're replacing old carpet or upgrading to hardwood, you can rely on Fu and his team at Shannara Flooring to get the job done. So when it's time for new flooring, ask yourself, call who? Call Fu. Call them direct at 205-518-6423. And you can see all the new styles for 2025 at shannaraflooring.com. All right. Win totals. They're out. And it's so early. I don't know how anyone can justify putting out win totals right now. Like today's signing day, we're going to spend a little time on tomorrow. Anyone remember what that is?
I thought we had that in December.
Yeah, we had one a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. No, that was 6 weeks ago. Yeah, signing day.
Yeah, we
signing
got one.
day is here.
Yeah, the portal closes in like a couple months. Yeah, we got one then, right?
Yeah, we got another one. Yeah, we got another sign day then.
Okay.
I completely forgot about
then another sign day coming up like whenever you want if you're a grad student. And then a signing day at the end of the summer. I think you can pretty much just sign whenever. You know, they're trying to move sign day to June. So you got that.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me when you can't sign.
Yeah, right.
At this point. So today is signing day. First Wednesday in February. So we haven't even put pen to paper yet, but we have win totals out. And hey, I'll fall on that grenade. Like I want to go through them too. They interest me. I think they're quite fascinating, to be honest with you. And these are according to FanDuel. And by the way, we'll have Tom Luganbill on the show tomorrow to help break down some of these signing classes. So if you think we're just completely avoiding signing day, you're right. We are totally delegating signing day responsibilities to Luganbill tomorrow at 8:00. So if you want to hear about guys that were signed and individual prospects, by all means, we got that covered. It's just not today. I don't really know a lot about recruiting. I know a few guys. I know enough to be dangerous. We can engage in a conversation about recruiting, but probably not going to go too deep down the rabbit hole. But Lugs will, and he will certainly help us with that. Let's go to win totals. We will start with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I was a little surprised, if you want me to be completely honest. Their win total for Alabama is at 8.5.
What?
You heard it. 8.5.
Oh boy.
What's also interesting is that the best teams in the SEC, according to the win totals, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas, their win totals, all 9.5.
Oh boy.
So when was the last time the best win total in the SEC was at 9.5 or worse? No, I couldn't answer that question, by the way. I'm not sure it's ever happened. Like consistently, it was 11 for some teams. I mean, 11 was like, all right, the favorite's 11. In some cases, the favorite was 11.5. And people were taking the over. And they were winning the over. That's how much things have changed. I mean, these conference schedules are insane now. And you're going to have, and I know people refuse to acknowledge this, and we've talked about this now for a while. You got to start being comfortable with 9-3. I know it's weird. I know it's messed up in the head. But 9-3 today, the 2025 version of 9-3 is 10-2 5 years ago. 10-2 5 years ago is like 11-1. 5 years before that. Why? Because the rosters are depleted. You can tell me how many stars these guys have. That's fine. What about your backups? How much experience they got? They played a lot? Oh, they're true freshmen? Perfect. Yeah, because you're going to get consistent play from true freshmen. There's one thing I know covering the sport and playing the sport and being around it for the last 20 years. You put true freshmen on the field, you're going to get really consistent performance. I, of course, say that tongue in cheek. But Alabama coming in at 8.5, alongside Alabama at 8.5. Probably wondering. LSU is at 8.5.
Okay.
Michigan is at 8.5. Indiana
Stop.
is at 8.5.
Stop.
Just saying.
Come on, Vegas.
I will take over, under.
Yeah, like that's like come on now.
Come on now. Let's keep going. There's a couple more that might interest you here. We have North Carolina
Under.
under lock.
Just don't,
Done.
Don't even give me the number.
Same team. North Carolina's at 7.5. Bill Belichick is all of a sudden going to turn what was a 6-6 program into now a contender.
I don't know.
And they've been a perennial 6-6.
Right.
I know they've had a couple years where they bounced up and they cycled up. That was with Drake May. All right. That's unlikely to be sustained. Now, maybe their quarterback's great. We'll see. I don't know. I think he's going to be a freshman. Maybe he won't be. Maybe he'll be Max Johnson.
Oh, boy. Definitely take the under.
We'll get Cole jacked up about that one. What do you think the reaction will be amongst Texas fans? Texas, guys. New in the SEC. Yep. 9.5 is your win total this year.
They look at it as disrespect. They're like, we got Arch Manning.
Yeah, they got
Arch
right?
Manning, dog.
Come on.
That's at least 5 wins right there, just
But
off
hang
the
on a
last
second.
name.
Just
Hang
like
on
the
a second.
Stars.
I think that didn't they win 11 last year?
They did with Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
So just let me make sure I get this right. They won 11 last year, and everybody seems to think they're a bona fide lock to go win the national championship or at least be in the mix. I think they are too. I think they're good, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think it's a guarantee. Kind of like what we talked about earlier with the bubble. Like, let me tell you what a guarantee is in my world. That is something that was without fail. That is 100%. So if I tell you I guarantee this happens, I guarantee the sun comes up tomorrow. I'm comfortable making that one. I feel pretty good. And guess what? If the sun doesn't come up tomorrow morning, we're probably all in trouble.
Yeah.
We probably all, you know what? We are going to have bigger fish to fry than cashing in on my guarantee. The guarantees to me are very hard to come by. And everyone seems to think the Texas is a guarantee. Well, according to Vegas, 50% chance that they're above 9.5 wins. 50% chance that they're below 9.5 wins because Vegas wants to get 50% of the money on either side, right? So if Vegas thinks it's 50-50 between 10 wins and 9 wins, that means it might be 50-50 between make the playoff and miss the playoff. I'm just saying. The teams that currently sit at the top right now for win totals. Ohio State, 10.5. I'll take the under. Oregon, 10.5. I'll take the under. Notre Dame, 10.5. I'll take the under. Penn State, 10.5. I'll take the over.
Penn State, 10.5.
I'll take the over.
Was Hendon Hooker coming back?
For Penn State?
Oh, he's at Tennessee. Sorry.
Oh.
I was like, whoa, hold on now.
I was going to say, hang on. I didn't know he played for Penn State.
Yeah,
I need to go back. Was he there before Virginia Tech? Before
Drew Aller. Yeah.
But I look at it like, guys, there's not a lot of guarantees in the sport this year. A couple other surprising ones, by the way. USC, 7.5.
Dang.
Southern Cal. The Trojans, 7.5.
Boy, have the mighty fallen.
The Miami Hurricanes, 8.5.
They got Carson Beck.
Carson Beck. ACC. They also played Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Kansas.
Oh, boy.
Yes, that Kansas. 7.5. Who wouldn't be on board for that? Florida. Last year they were 4.5. They went over. Won 8 games. Good year.
Yeah.
Yeah. We think that was a fugazi. You're at 6.5. That's
We're
what
at
Vegas.
6.5?
That's what Vegas saying. That's what Vegas saying. Colorado.
Oh boy.
6.5. I'll take the under there. Man, I'm amazed by some of these, man. And Vegas basically telling everybody nobody's good.
They're dangling in front of you.
Seriously, they're just sitting there telling you everybody is going to be bad. Like, win totals, people are always going to err on the side of higher, right? Like, I think you ask your average better, like the average run of the mill better. If I went and asked my wife, Meredith, Georgia win total 9.5, I bet you anything she'd say over. I don't know that for sure, and I'm not sure. I think I might have to explain it a little more to her, but I think she'd grasp the concept. I bet you she'd take over, which means that Vegas is probably hedging all these a little higher to maybe mess with the public. Means that most of these are probably going to go under, which is kind of crazy to think about. 10.5 for Ohio State, 10.5 for Oregon, 10.5 for Notre Dame, 10.5 for Penn State. Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and Clemson, all 9.5. Bama, LSU, Michigan, Indiana, 8.5. This is wild, man. We are living in the upside down world. And we'll put a bow on the show in the upside down world next. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, Justin 4-5. Welcome back, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, Jock 94.5. Appreciate Eric, Mac Lain, Dr. Lyle Kane, no relation, and Sam McKewon joining us here today. Mac Lain, if you missed the show, you can go download the podcast wherever you get the podcast. We talked some ACC with Mac. We talked with Dr. Lyle Kane about his experience working with Scott Cochran, who is now the head coach of West Alabama. Very excited for him. Really happy for that opportunity. I know he'll do a great job in Livingston, do an awesome job. Very, very excited for that. I mean, that's a good program. I mean, they should be able to win, and he's got a lot of relationships, haven't been in the state for a very long time. So hopefully he can get things going over there as well. And then Sam McKewon, who joined the show, talking a little Nebraska football. We parlayed that conversation into some blue blood discussion. Who are some teams we'd love to see back? We talked a little bit about the ACC and how they're rewarding performance with their revenue distributions and how that could have a trickle-down effect on other conferences' arrangements in the future. I think it's probably only a matter of time, but it's all available to you when you go and download the podcast wherever you get the podcast. So appreciate Mac, appreciate Dr. Kane, and appreciate Sam McKewon, who joined us here. Tomorrow we'll have Wimp Sanderson, Tom Luganbill on the show, probably another guest or two. Going to talk signing day. Today is signing day, believe it or not. We are also going to talk tomorrow about a couple of interesting things coming down. There's a Georgia bill that will exempt college students from paying state income tax. That's interesting. You got Heisman favorite odds that are out. We'll hit that as well. We'll do a little NFL. We'll do a little top three. So tomorrow's show should be jam-packed like Thursdays always are. Also, we're going to talk about some of these owners and their yachts. Because you want to talk about some chaos that I've seen on social media the last couple of days in regards to these owners. It's like
breaded.
It's a yacht measuring contest. 3-Man Front's next.